The fluorescent lights of Mercy General's trauma bay cast harsh shadows across the blood-slicked floor as Rear Admiral Marcus Brennan's fist connected with a senior physician's jaw, sending the man sprawling into a crash cart. Two orderlies tried to pin his arms. He threw them off like paper dolls. His eyes were wild, unfocused, his uniform soaked crimson from the shrapnel wounds that decorated his chest and abdomen. Every doctor in the room had tried to approach. Every single one had been knocked back. The restraints lay broken on the floor. The sedatives weren't working. The most decorated SEAL commander in active service was bleeding out on their watch, and no one could get within 3 feet of him. Then a voice cut through the chaos, quiet, steady, female. "Phantom 6, stand down." The Admiral's fist froze mid-swing. His eyes found the small figure in worn scrubs standing at the edge of the trauma bay. For 3 heartbeats, the room held its breath. Then Marcus Brennan, the man who'd led Black Ops missions in 14 countries, who'd survived torture and insurgent ambushes, who'd killed enemy combatants with his bare hands, collapsed back onto the gurney without another word of resistance. Every head turned toward Nurse Sarah Chen, the woman they'd spent 6 months treating like furniture. Before we dive into this story, I want to invite you to stay until the very end, because what happens next will change everything you think you know. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. And let's begin. Sarah Chen's hands trembled as she inserted the IV catheter into the elderly woman's papery skin. It was her 4th attempt. The vein rolled away from the needle again, and she heard Dr. Richard Caldwell's disgusted sigh from across the nurse's station. "For God's sake, Chen, my grandmother could get that line in faster." His voice carried across the emergency department of Mercy General Hospital in Clearwater Bay, loud enough that patients in nearby beds turned to look. "Maybe try using your eyes this time." Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks. She kept her gaze down, focused on the patient's arm, and tried again. The needle slid home. Blood flashed back into the chamber. Relief washed through her, but she didn't let herself smile. She secured the line, hung the saline bag, and checked the flow rate with methodical precision. "About damn time," Caldwell muttered, already turning away. Sarah disposed of the sharps in silence. The elderly patient reached up and squeezed her hand. "Thank you, dear. You did just fine." But fine wasn't good enough at Mercy General. Not for someone like Sarah Chen, who'd appeared on their staffing roster 18 months ago with nursing credentials that checked out perfectly, but a work history that went back exactly 4 years and 2 months. Before that, nothing. No previous hospitals, no references. Just a license, a quiet demeanor, and hands that shook whenever anyone watched her too closely. The charge nurse, Gloria Martinez, had tried to be kind at first. "We all get nervous," she'd said during Sarah's first week. "You'll settle in." But 18 months later, Sarah's hands still trembled. She still fumbled with equipment. She still drew attention for all the wrong reasons. What Gloria didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Sarah's hands only shook when she wanted them to, when she needed people to see exactly what she wanted them to see, a mediocre nurse who'd never be worth a second glance. The afternoon shift dragged toward evening. Sarah restocked supply cabinets, changed bedpans, and took vitals while doctors and senior nurses talked around her as if she were invisible. At the water cooler, 2 residents discussed their weekend plans without lowering their voices, even though Sarah stood less than 3 feet away, filling a patient's water pitcher. "Did you see Chen almost miss that stick on the diabetic in Bay 3? One of them said. "I swear she's getting worse, not better." "How is she still employed here?" the other replied. "I heard Caldwell put in another complaint about her last week." Sarah's expression didn't change. She finished filling the pitcher and walked past them without a word. Let them think what they wanted. Being underestimated was safer than being understood. At 6:47 p.m., the police radio chatter started filtering through the emergency department's scanner, multiple units responding to an incident at the Port Authority. Possible explosion. Mass casualties expected. The charge nurse began mobilizing trauma teams, calling in extra staff, clearing beds. Sarah moved to help prep Bay 1, the largest trauma suite, but Gloria caught her arm. "Chen, I need you on basic triage. Take walk-ins and minor injuries. Keep them out of our way." "I can handle trauma. I'm certified." "I need people I can count on in the trauma bays tonight," Gloria said firmly. "You take triage." Sarah nodded and stepped back. Around her, more experienced nurses rushed past, pulling on protective gowns, double-checking equipment. She made her way to the triage desk and sat down, accepting her assigned role without argument. That's what she did. She accepted. She complied. She stayed small. The first wave of casualties arrived 20 minutes later. Construction workers with minor lacerations, office workers suffering smoke inhalation, security guards with ringing ears and powder burns. Sarah processed them efficiently, her paperwork flawless, her assessments accurate. She tagged colors, directed patients, and stayed completely out of everyone else's way. Then the second wave came. The ambulance bay doors crashed open, and a team of paramedics burst through at a dead sprint, pushing a gurney that carried a man in a torn naval uniform. Blood soaked through the pressure bandages on his chest and abdomen. An IV bag swung wildly from the pole. One paramedic straddled the patient, maintaining chest compressions. Male, approximately 55. Multiple penetrating trauma from the explosion at the Port Authority, the lead paramedic called out, breathless. Shrapnel wounds to the chest and abdomen. Massive blood loss. We've lost his pulse twice en route. He's combative as hell. We had to restrain him, but he keeps breaking through. The trauma team swarmed. Dr. Caldwell took point, barking orders. Nurses scissored away the uniform, revealing a torso decorated with scars that spoke of a lifetime of violence survived. Among the old wounds, fresh injuries wept blood, jagged metal fragments still embedded in flesh, a deep laceration across the ribs, a puncture wound dangerously close to the heart. Then the patient's eyes opened. One moment he was unconscious. The next, he was moving, fast, explosive, trained. His right arm shot up and grabbed the nearest doctor by the throat, lifting him off his feet. The leather restraint snapped like thread. His left fist caught a nurse in the shoulder, sending her sprawling into an equipment cart. The crash team scattered as Marcus Brennan, Rear Admiral of the United States Navy, fought every person trying to save his life. "Get those restraints back on him," Caldwell shouted, backing away from the thrashing patient. "Someone give me 10 milligrams of—" Brennan's boot caught an orderly in the chest. The man flew backward into a monitor, shattering the screen. "He's delirious from blood loss," a resident called out. "He doesn't know where he is." Two security guards rushed in with reinforced restraints. They managed to pin Brennan's left arm long enough to get the strap around the bed rail, but his right arm was still free, still swinging. His eyes were unfocused, seeing threats that weren't there, reliving battles fought in rooms that no longer existed. "I need everyone to step back," Caldwell ordered. "We can't help him if he—" Brennan's fist connected with the security guard's temple. The man crumpled. Sarah stood at the triage desk, 30 feet from the trauma bay, her fingers white-knuckled on the edge of the counter. She watched the chaos unfold with an expression carefully calibrated to show concern and helplessness. But inside, recognition blazed through her like electricity. She knew those scars. She'd seen that fighting style. She'd trained alongside men who moved exactly like that. And she knew exactly what words would stop him. Gloria's voice cut through the noise. "Chen, I need you to stay at your post. Do not, I repeat, do not approach that patient." Sarah nodded obediently. The trauma team regrouped, trying a different approach. They came from all sides at once, trying to overwhelm him with numbers. Brennan took down 3 of them before they even got close. A nurse managed to grab his right wrist. He twisted, reversed the grip, and sent her stumbling into a supply cabinet. "We're going to lose him," someone whispered. Caldwell's face was red with frustration and fear. "Get me 50 milligrams of ketamine. We'll sedate him chemically if we can't—" Sarah was already moving. She crossed the 30 feet to the trauma bay in complete silence, her trembling hands suddenly steady, her uncertain posture transformed into something precise and controlled. The change was so subtle that no one noticed until she was already inside the trauma bay, standing at the foot of Brennan's gurney. "Chen, get out of there!" Gloria shouted, but Sarah didn't move. She stood perfectly still, waiting for the exact right moment, that split second when Brennan's wild eyes would sweep past her position. When his gaze found her, she spoke. "Phantom 6, stand down." Her voice was quiet, calm. It cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. The effect was instantaneous. Brennan's fist froze in mid-swing, 6 inches from a doctor's face. His entire body went rigid. His eyes, wild and unfocused a second before, suddenly sharpened, locked onto Sarah's face with laser precision. The trauma bay fell silent. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. No one breathed. Then Marcus Brennan, the most dangerous man in the room, slowly lowered his fist and collapsed back onto the gurney. His chest heaved with ragged breaths. Blood continued to seep from his wounds, but he was still, compliant, waiting for orders. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Every head in the trauma bay turned towards Sarah. The small, uncertain nurse who couldn't get an IV in without multiple attempts. The one they'd been ready to write up for incompetence. She stood at the foot of the gurney, her hands clasped in front of her, her expression neutral. "He's stable now," she said quietly. "You can work on him." Caldwell stared at her. "What did you just say to him?" "I asked him to calm down." "That's not—" "What did you actually say?" Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "I asked him to calm down, doctor. He responded. You should probably start treatment before he bleeds out." The rebuke was gentle but unmistakable. Caldwell's jaw tightened, but he couldn't argue. He turned back to the patient, and the trauma team surged forward again, this time without resistance. Brennan lay still as they cut away the rest of his uniform, started new IV lines, and began the desperate work of keeping him alive. Sarah turned to leave. "Chen." Gloria's voice stopped her. The charge nurse's expression was unreadable. "What just happened?" "He responded to a calm voice," Sarah said. "Sometimes that's all it takes." "That wasn't just a calm voice. What did you say to him?" "I don't remember exactly. I just reacted." It was a lie, delivered with perfect sincerity. Sarah had learned long ago that people believed what they wanted to believe. If they wanted to see a lucky guess, they would see a lucky guess. Gloria studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Get back to triage. We've still got incoming." Sarah obeyed, walking back to her station with the same uncertain shuffle she'd cultivated for 18 months. Behind her, she heard the trauma team working in rapid coordination, Caldwell's voice calling out orders, the beep of monitors stabilizing. She sat down at the triage desk and pulled up the next patient file. Her hands trembled again as she typed, the carefully maintained illusion restored. But she could feel eyes on her. Suspicious eyes. Calculating eyes. Security guard Jake Morrison stood near the ambulance bay entrance, one hand resting on his radio, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. He'd been one of the guards who'd tried to restrain Brennan. He'd seen everything. Sarah kept her head down and focused on her work. 2 hours later, the immediate crisis had passed. Brennan had been stabilized, packed with 18 units of blood, and rushed to surgery. The OR team worked for 4 hours to remove shrapnel, repair damaged organs, and close the wounds that would have killed a lesser man. By midnight, he was in the ICU, sedated but alive. Sarah finished her shift at 7 a.m. She changed out of her scrubs in the locker room, nodding politely to the nurses who ignored her, and walked to her car in the pre-dawn darkness. The parking garage was nearly empty, her footsteps echoing off concrete. She made it halfway to her vehicle before she noticed the man leaning against the driver's door. Jake Morrison straightened when he saw her. He was in his mid-30s, built like someone who'd done military time, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Rough night," he said conversationally. Sarah stopped 6 feet away, keys in hand. "Yes. That was something, what you did in there, with the Admiral. I got lucky." "Yeah." Jake smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Funny thing about luck, sometimes it looks a lot like training." Sarah's expression didn't change. "I should get home. It's been a long shift." "I'm sure it has." Jake didn't move from her car. "I did 8 years in the Marine Corps. Saw a lot of combat. Know what I noticed tonight?" "What?" "The way you moved when you approached that gurney. Most people, they're scared. They hesitate. They telegraph their fear. You didn't hesitate at all. You moved like someone who's done it before, someone who's used to operating in hostile environments." Sarah's fingers tightened on her keys. "I appreciate your service, but I really need to go. And that phrase you used, Phantom 6, that's not something a civilian would know. That's a military call sign, high-level special operations, the kind of thing that doesn't show up in any public records." "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Right." Jake pushed off from the car, giving her space to approach, but his eyes never left her face. "Well, If you ever feel like talking about how a nurse with shaky hands knows classified call signs for SEAL team commanders, you know where to find me. He walked away without another word. Sarah got into her car and sat there for a full minute, her hands perfectly steady on the wheel, her breathing controlled. Then she started the engine and drove home to the small apartment she'd rented under the name Sarah Chen, a name that belonged to someone who died 4 years ago, leaving behind a perfect set of credentials for someone who needed to disappear. She slept for 3 hours, then returned to Mercy General for her next shift. The hospital felt different. People looked at her differently. Some with curiosity, others with suspicion, a few with something that might have been respect. Gloria pulled her aside before she could clock in. "Chen, I need you in the ICU today." "The ICU? I'm not ICU certified." "Admiral Brennan specifically requested you." "Well, not specifically. He's still sedated. But the military liaison said he'd want familiar faces when he wakes up, and you're the one who calmed him down yesterday, so you're assigned to his care." Sarah felt the trap closing. "I don't think that's appropriate. I'm just a floor nurse. It wasn't a request, Chen. It was an order from people who outrank both of us." Gloria's expression softened slightly. "Look, I don't know what happened yesterday, but whatever you did, it worked. Just do it again if we need it." The ICU was on the 4th floor, a secure wing with restricted access and constant surveillance. Sarah badged in and found Brennan's room at the end of the hallway, flanked by 2 naval intelligence officers in dress uniforms. They checked her credentials twice before allowing her to enter. The room was dimly lit, filled with the quiet beeping of monitors. Marcus Brennan lay motionless in the bed, tubes running from his arms, chest, and throat. The surgery had saved his life, but he was still critical. His vitals were stable but weak. Sarah checked the monitors, reviewed his chart, and adjusted the IV drip exactly as she'd been trained to do in nursing school. Everything by the book. Everything normal. Except for the way she examined the medication bags with microscopic attention, checking lot numbers and seals for any sign of tampering. Except for the way she positioned herself so she could see both the door and the window in her peripheral vision. Except for the way she noted the security camera angles and the blind spots near the medical supply cabinet. Old habits didn't die. They just went quiet and waited. The first 48 hours passed without incident. Brennan remained stable. Sarah rotated shifts with 2 other nurses, both more experienced, both more comfortable in the ICU environment. They treated her with polite distance, neither friendly nor hostile. On the 3rd day, Brennan's sedation was reduced. The doctors wanted him conscious for neurological assessments. Sarah wasn't scheduled to be in the room when he woke, but she made sure she was nearby, restocking supplies in the medication room adjacent to his suite. She heard his voice through the wall, rough from intubation, confused, demanding answers. The attending physician's calmer tones. The military liaison explaining where he was and what had happened. Then, cutting through everything else. "Where's the nurse? The one who was there when I came in?" Sarah's hands stilled on the supply cart. "We have several nurses assigned to your care, Admiral," the doctor replied. "Can you be more specific?" "Small, black hair." She knew. He stopped. Even drugged and injured, he was careful about what he said in front of witnesses. "She was there in the ER. I want to talk to her." 10 minutes later, Gloria found Sarah in the medication room. "He's asking for you." Sarah followed her to Brennan's suite. The military liaison stepped aside and she entered alone. Marcus Brennan looked like hell, pale beneath his tan with dark circles under his eyes and pain lines etched around his mouth, but his gaze was sharp and focused when it landed on her. "You," he said. Sarah approached the bedside, her posture professional, her expression neutral. "How are you feeling, Admiral?" "Like I got blown up." He studied her face. "How did you know?" "Know what?" "Don't play dumb." "How did you know my call sign?" Sarah glanced at the security camera in the corner. Brennan followed her gaze and understood immediately. He gestured weakly toward the door. "Everyone out." The liaison started to protest. Brennan cut him off with a look that could have stripped paint. "Out! Now! That's an order!" When the room was empty, Brennan turned back to Sarah. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" "I'm your nurse." "Bullshit. Nurses don't know classified SEAL call signs. They don't move like you moved. They don't have eyes like yours. I don't know what you mean. Brennan's laugh was bitter and short. Yes, you do. I've worked with enough operators to recognize one when I see one, so I'll ask again. Who are you really? Sarah considered her options. Lying to this man would be pointless. He'd already seen too much. But the truth was dangerous in ways she couldn't predict. Before she could answer, Brennan's monitors started alarming. His heart rate spiked. His blood pressure dropped. His oxygen saturation plummeted. Sarah moved on pure instinct, slamming the code button on the wall and grabbing the crash card in one fluid motion. The code team was 30 seconds out. Too far. Brennan was coding now. She tilted his head, cleared his airway, checked for obstruction. Nothing. His lungs were clear. The problem was cardiac. VFib, she said to herself, reading the monitor. Ventricular fibrillation. His heart was quivering uselessly instead of pumping. The crash cart had a defibrillator. Sarah charged the paddles, set the jewels, and placed them on Brennan's chest with the precision of someone who'd done this 100 times in conditions far worse than a clean hospital ICU. Clear. The shock jolted his body. The monitor showed no change. She charged again. Higher voltage. Clear. The second shock hit. On the monitor, the chaotic rhythm stuttered, then resolved into a normal sinus pattern. Brennan gasped, his eyes flying open. The code team burst through the door just as Sarah was rechecking his vitals. They swarmed the bed, taking over, calling out assessments. Sarah stepped back, hands raised, giving them space. Dr. Caldwell appeared in the doorway, breathless. What happened? He coded, Sarah said quietly. VFib, 2 shocks. He's back. Caldwell stared at her. You ran the code? Alone? The team was 30 seconds out. I didn't have 30 seconds. You're a floor nurse. You're not ACLS certified. You're not authorized to... She saved my life, Brennan interrupted, his voice weak but clear. Again. Caldwell's expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and reluctant acceptance. Finally, he nodded curtly. Fine, but I want a full incident report. And Chen, you're off this case. Effective immediately. Sarah didn't argue. She left the room, walked straight to the staff locker room, and changed into her street clothes. Gloria was waiting outside. You're suspended pending investigation, the charge nurse said. Not unkindly, but firmly. The hospital needs to review what happened. Running a code without proper certification, accessing restricted areas, the incident with the Admiral's initial admission. It's all adding up to questions we can't ignore. I understand. Do you? Gloria's eyes were worried. Chen, I don't know what's going on with you, but whatever it is, it's bigger than nursing protocol. Security's been asking questions about your background. HR can't find records from before 4 years ago. If there's something you need to tell me, there's nothing, Sarah said. I'm just a nurse who got lucky twice. Gloria didn't believe her. Sarah could see it in her eyes, but she also didn't push. Sarah collected her things and left Mercy General through the employee entrance. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. She made it to her car without incident, started the engine, and drove 3 blocks before she noticed the tail. Black sedan, 2 cars back, matching her turns with professional precision. Sarah's jaw tightened. She took a deliberately random route through Clearwater Bay, watching the sedan stay with her, not trying to hide, wanting her to know she was being followed. Finally, she pulled into a public parking garage and waited. The sedan parked 2 spaces away. The driver got out. A woman in her 40s wearing a dark suit and an expression that gave nothing away. She approached Sarah's window and held up a badge, FBI. Sarah's hand moved toward the gun hidden in her center console, then stopped. If they'd wanted to arrest her, they would have done it at the hospital. This was something else. She rolled down the window. Commander Elena Torres, the FBI agent said, or should I call you Sarah Chen? Every muscle in Sarah's body locked. That name, her real name, hadn't been spoken aloud in 4 years. Hearing it now felt like being dragged back into a world she'd fought desperately to leave behind. I don't know what you're talking about, she said carefully. The agent smiled without humor. Yes, you do. And right now you have 2 choices. You can keep pretending to be a mediocre nurse with shaky hands, or you can come with me and help us save Admiral Brennan's life. Because what happened to him at the Port Authority wasn't an accident. It was an assassination attempt. And whoever tried to kill him once is going to try again. Sarah stared at her. Why would I? Because you know exactly who he is and what he represents. Because you used to run the same kind of operations he's running now. And because the people trying to kill him are the same people who put a price on your head 4 years ago. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah's hand was still resting on the center console, inches from her weapon. She could shoot this agent, run, disappear again. She'd done it before. She had protocols, safe houses, money stashed in a dozen cities. But Marcus Brennan was lying in a hospital bed, vulnerable, surrounded by people who didn't understand the kind of enemy that wanted him dead. And despite everything she'd done to walk away from that world, despite the years of hiding and the careful construction of a new identity, she couldn't let him die without trying to stop it. She looked at the FBI agent. What do you need? They drove to a federal building downtown, where Sarah was escorted through layers of security into a conference room that had been converted into a command center. Screens covered the walls, displaying surveillance feeds from Mercy General's ICU, personnel files, and classified briefings that made Sarah's chest tighten. A man in a Navy uniform stood at the head of the table. Captain Raymond Hayes, according to the name tape. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 72 hours. Commander Torres, he said. No warmth, just acknowledgement. I'm not a commander anymore, Sarah replied. I haven't been for 4 years. That's debatable. Legally, you're still on the books. Your discharge papers were never processed. Officially, you're AWOL. Officially, I'm dead. Hayes nodded slowly. Yes. That was the story we sold. After the incident in Yemen, after what happened to your team, we thought it was safer to let the world think you'd been killed. We thought you'd come back when you were ready. I was never coming back. And yet here you are. Sarah leaned against the wall, arms crossed. The FBI agent said someone's trying to kill Admiral Brennan. Tell me why. Hayes pulled up a file on the main screen. 3 weeks ago, Admiral Brennan returned from an off-book operation in the South China Sea. The mission was classified, deep black, need to know only. He brought back evidence of something that certain people would prefer stayed buried. What kind of evidence? Proof of illegal black site prisons being operated by members of our own military command structure. Sites where captured enemy combatants were being held without trial, without oversight, without due process. Sites where enhanced interrogation was the official policy. Sarah's blood went cold. That's a war crime. Yes. Hayes' expression was grim. Brennan planned to bring this to the Joint Chiefs. He had documentation, testimony from operators who'd worked at these sites, coordinates, names. Everything needed to trigger a full investigation. So someone tried to kill him before he could testify. We believe so. The explosion at the Port Authority was made to look like a terrorist attack, but our analysis suggests it was a targeted hit. The bomb was placed specifically to kill Brennan. Everyone else was collateral damage. Sarah processed this. If they tried once and failed, they'll try again. They can't let him wake up and talk. Exactly. Which is why we need you. You know how these operations work. You know the kind of people who run them. And you've already saved his life twice. Hayes met her eyes. We need you to do it again. You want me to go back to Mercy General as bait. I want you to go back as protection. We'll brief you on everything we know, give you resources, and let you do what you do best. Identify threats and neutralize them before they get close. Sarah laughed bitterly. I stopped doing that 4 years ago for a reason, Captain. I'm not that person anymore. Yes, you are. You proved it tonight when you ran that code. You proved it when you saved him in the ER. You can pretend to be Sarah Chen all you want, but when the moment comes, you revert, because it's who you are. The words cut deep because they were true. Sarah had spent 4 years hiding, 4 years trying to be someone smaller and quieter and less dangerous. But the second she'd seen Marcus Brennan fighting for his life, all of that careful construction had crumbled. She'd moved like the operator she used to be. She'd thought like the commander she'd trained to become. She couldn't unkill that part of herself. If I do this, she said slowly, I do it my way. No oversight, no questions about my methods. You put me in place, and then you trust me. Hayes considered this. Agreed. But understand, if this goes wrong, if you're compromised, we won't be able to protect you. You'll be on your own. I've been on my own for 4 years. I know how it works. Then we have a deal. Hayes extended his hand. Sarah looked at it for a long moment. Shaking that hand meant stepping back into the world she'd fought so hard to escape. It meant accepting that Sarah Chen had only ever been a mask. And underneath, Commander Elena Torres was still alive and still capable of the things she'd done in darker rooms than this one. But it also meant protecting someone who'd dedicated his life to the same cause she'd once believed in. It meant stopping the people who'd turned necessary operations into instruments of cruelty. It meant justice. She shook his hand. 4 hours later, Elena, returned to Mercy General through the employee entrance. Her suspension had been mysteriously lifted. New credentials waited for her at security, granting her expanded access to the ICU and surrounding areas. She'd been briefed on current threats: 3 potential suspects within the hospital staff, 2 former special operations personnel who'd gone dark after being dishonorably discharged, and 1 current naval officer whose financial record showed irregularities consistent with someone being paid off. She'd been given a secure comm device disguised as a pager and a panic code that would bring a federal response team within 90 seconds. She'd been shown the evacuation routes and the safe rooms and the blind spots in hospital security, and then she'd been sent in alone. The ICU was quiet when she arrived just after midnight. The night shift nurse, a tired woman named Patricia, looked surprised to see her. "Chen, I thought you were suspended." "Administrative error," Elena said smoothly. "They sorted it out. I'm back on Admiral Brennan's care rotation." Patricia looked relieved rather than suspicious. "Good. I'm swamped tonight. Room 412 down the hall. He's stable but restless. Vitals are solid, but he keeps trying to pull out his lines." Elena nodded and made her way to Brennan's room. The naval intelligence officers were gone, replaced by federal agents who checked her credentials before waving her through. Brennan was awake when she entered. His eyes tracked her movement across the room with sharp awareness. "They sent you back," he said. "They did. Because someone's trying to kill me." "Yes." Brennan studied her face. "Are you here to protect me or finish the job?" Elena met his gaze evenly. "If I wanted you dead, Admiral, you'd already be dead. I'm here to make sure the people who tried at the Port Authority don't get a second chance." "And who are you really? FBI? Naval Intelligence? Does it matter?" "Yeah, it does, because if I'm going to trust you with my life, I need to know whose side you're on." Elena pulled a chair close to his bedside and sat down. 4 years ago, I was Commander Elena Torres, Special Operations, Black Level Clearance. I ran missions in places that don't exist on any map. I did things that would make your evidence look like parking violations. She paused. Then my team got compromised. Most of them died. The ones who survived were hunted by the same people you're about to testify against. So I walked away, faked my death, became someone else. Why come back now? Because you have proof of things I saw but couldn't prove. Because you're trying to do what I failed to do, bring them down from the inside. She leaned forward. And because I'm tired of running. Brennan was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. "Okay, I trust you." "Don't," Elena said flatly. "Don't trust anyone right now. Not the nurses, not the doctors, not even the people who say they're protecting you. The people who want you dead have resources, connections, and patience. They'll wait for the perfect moment, and then they'll strike." "So what do we do?" "We wait for them to make a move, and when they do..." Elena's expression hardened. "We make sure it's their last one." The attack came 36 hours later, at 3:42 a.m., during the quietest part of the night shift. Elena was in the medication room reviewing patient charts when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Too light, too careful. She glanced through the window and saw a nurse she didn't recognize approaching Brennan's room. Male, mid-30s, wearing scrubs and a hospital ID that looked correct at first glance. But something was wrong. His gait was too controlled. His eyes swept the hallway in a pattern that suggested tactical awareness rather than tired routine. And when he reached for the medication cart, his hand moved with the economy of motion that came from military training. Elena's hand went to the comm device in her pocket. She was about to trigger the alert when she saw what the man pulled from the cart: a syringe, pre-filled. The liquid inside was clear, not insulin, not saline, something else. The man badged into Brennan's room. The door closed behind him. Elena moved. She crossed the hallway in absolute silence, using the badge Hayes had given her to override the lock. She opened the door without a sound and stepped inside. The man was already at Brennan's IV pole, reaching for the port. In 3 seconds, he would inject whatever was in that syringe directly into Brennan's bloodline. In 4 seconds, the Admiral would be dead. Elena moved in 5. She covered the distance to the IV pole in 2 strides, grabbed the man's wrist, and twisted with enough force to snap bone. The syringe clattered to the floor. The man spun, fast and trained, throwing an elbow at her face. She ducked under it, hooked his leg, and drove him face first into the floor with a textbook takedown that she hadn't used in 4 years but remembered in her muscles like breathing. The man tried to roll, reaching for something at his waistband, a knife, a gun. Elena didn't wait to find out. She drove her knee into his spine, grabbed his reaching hand, and twisted it up behind his back at an angle that made him scream. "Don't move," she said quietly. "If you move, I break it. If you keep moving, I break you." The man went still. Brennan was awake now, eyes wide, breathing hard. Jesus Christ! Elena kept her knee on the man's spine and triggered the comm device. "Code Black, room 412, 1 hostile down, immediate extraction required." The response was instantaneous. 30 seconds later, the federal agents burst through the door, weapons drawn. They took control of the situation, securing the man in restraints and dragging him out of the room. One of them paused at the door and looked at Elena. "Clean work." "Thanks," she said. "Test the syringe. I want to know what he was planning to use." "Already bagged it." When they were gone, Elena turned to Brennan. "Are you hurt?" "No." He was staring at her with new understanding. "You really were special operations." "I told you I was." "Yeah, but telling and seeing are different things." He shook his head slowly. "That takedown, you put him down in less than a second. Most nurses don't move like that. Most nurses aren't protecting admirals from assassination attempts." Brennan laughed, sharp and short. "Fair point." Then his expression sobered. "They're going to keep trying, aren't they?" "Yes, until you're dead or until they're caught, they'll keep trying." "Then we'd better make sure they get caught first." Elena pulled the chair back to his bedside and sat down. "Tell me everything, Admiral. Every name, every location, every piece of evidence you have. Because the only way to stop this is to make the information public before they can silence you." And so he talked. Through the rest of the night and into the early morning, Marcus Brennan told Elena Torres everything he knew about the illegal black site prisons, the officers who ran them, and the command structure that protected them. He told her about the missing operators, the falsified records, and the money trails that led back to names she recognized, names that made her hands clench and her jaw tighten. He told her about the one name that sat at the center of it all, Vice Admiral Thomas Keller, Brennan's own deputy, and a man both of them had once trusted with their lives. And as dawn broke over Clearwater Bay, Elena Torres felt something she hadn't felt in 4 years. The cold, focused clarity of purpose that came with knowing exactly what needed to be done and exactly how much it was going to cost. The man they'd taken into custody broke under interrogation in less than 2 hours. He wasn't military, he was contracted talent, paid through a shell company that traced back to offshore accounts. But he gave them one piece of critical intelligence before his lawyer shut him down. The assassination team wasn't done. They'd sent him as a test to probe the defenses. The real strike was coming next, and it would be overwhelming enough that no single nurse, no matter how well trained, would be able to stop it. They had less than 12 hours. Elena stood in the Federal Command Center, staring at the surveillance feeds from Mercy General while Captain Hayes coordinated with his team. The hospital looked peaceful on the monitors. Night shift nurses making their rounds, security guards checking doors, patients sleeping in their beds. But Elena knew better. Peaceful was just another word for vulnerable. "We need to move him," she said, cutting through the tactical discussion happening around her. "Get Brennan out of that hospital and into a secure military facility where we can control every variable." Hayes shook his head. "He's not stable enough for transport. The surgeons were clear. Moving him now could rupture the repairs they made. He needs at least another 48 hours before he can be safely relocated." "Then he's a sitting target, which is why you're going back in." Hayes pulled up a schematic of the ICU on the main screen. "We're reinforcing security. 4 additional agents in plainclothes. 1 in the medication room, 1 at each entrance, 2 roaming the floor. We'll have eyes on every corridor, every stairwell, every access point." Elena studied the layout with a critical eye. "It's not enough. These people don't send amateurs twice. Whoever's coming next will be professional, well-funded, and they'll have planned for increased security." "What do you suggest?" "I suggest we assume they can get past your agents and plan accordingly." Elena pointed to the schematic. "The ICU has 3 entrances: main elevator bank, staff stairwell, and the emergency exit on the north side. Your agents will cover those, but there are other ways in: the ventilation system, the exterior windows, the old service tunnel that connects to the basement. Any operator worth their salt would have identified those by now." Hayes frowned. "The ventilation shafts are too small for a person." "Not for a person, for a device. Poison gas, incendiary charge, anything that doesn't require direct access." Elena's finger traced the path of the air ducts. "And the service tunnel was supposedly sealed off after the hospital renovation, but I guarantee someone's checked whether that seal is actually secure." "You're saying we need to lock down an entire hospital." "I'm saying you need to accept that they're going to get inside no matter what you do, so instead of trying to keep them out, we need to be ready when they arrive." The room fell quiet. Hayes exchanged glances with his second-in-command, then nodded slowly. "All right. You're tactical lead on this. What do you need?" "Time to prep the environment, full access to hospital maintenance and security systems. And I need everyone to understand that when this goes down, they follow my orders without question or hesitation." "Done. You have 6 hours until shift change. Use them wisely." Elena left the federal building and drove back to Mercy General as the sun rose over Clearwater Bay. The hospital was waking up, day shift arriving, visitors starting to trickle through the main entrance, the cafeteria opening for breakfast. Normal people doing normal things, completely unaware that somewhere in this building, a countdown had begun. She badged into the ICU and found Patricia finishing her shift notes at the nurses' station. The older woman looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her movements slow with fatigue. "Rough night?" Elena asked. Patricia glanced up, managing a weak smile. "You could say that. After what happened with that man trying to hurt the Admiral, everyone's on edge. Security's been through here 3 times, asking questions, checking IDs. It's like working in a prison. Better a prison than a crime scene." "I suppose." Patricia closed her chart and stood. "You're staying on his detail?" "For the foreseeable future." "Good. He seems calmer when you're around." Patricia gathered her things. "There's something about you, Chen. I can't put my finger on it, but you're different from the other nurses. You move differently. You notice things." Elena kept her expression neutral. "I just pay attention." "It's more than that. But whatever it is, I'm glad you're here." Patricia headed for the elevator, leaving Elena alone at the station. Different. The word echoed in Elena's mind as she pulled up the security feeds on the nurse's station computer. Patricia wasn't wrong. Elena was different. She'd been trained to be different, molded into something that could operate in the spaces between normal and dangerous, always watching, always calculating, always 3 moves ahead. She spent the next 2 hours walking the ICU floor, memorizing sight lines and response times, identifying choke points and fallback positions. To the day shift staff, she looked like a diligent nurse checking on patients. To the federal agents positioned throughout the ward, she looked like someone conducting a tactical assessment. Both interpretations were correct. At 9 a.m., Dr. Caldwell arrived for rounds. He spotted Elena near the medication room and his expression immediately soured. "Chen, you're back." "Yes, doctor." "I heard about last night, about the incident in Admiral Brennan's room." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I also heard you took down an armed intruder with your bare hands. Care to explain how a floor nurse acquired those particular skills? Elena met his gaze without flinching. I reacted to protect a patient. That's my job. Your job is to monitor vitals and administer medication, not engage in hand-to-hand combat with potential assassins. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. Who are you really? I'm exactly who my credentials say I am. Then your credentials are lying. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. I had HR dig deeper into your background. You know what they found? Nothing. Before 4 years ago, Sarah Chen doesn't exist. No employment history, no education records beyond the nursing license, no social media presence. You're a ghost. Elena's pulse remained steady, her breathing controlled. Some people value privacy, doctor. Privacy is one thing, complete absence from the digital world is another. The only people who achieve that kind of invisibility are either in witness protection or... He stopped, realization dawning in his eyes. Or they're running from something, or hiding. If you have concerns about my employment, take them to HR. I already did. They told me to back off, said your clearance comes from people who outrank everyone in this hospital. Caldwell stepped even closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Whatever's happening with Admiral Brennan, whatever Black Ops conspiracy you're part of, I want it out of my hospital. You're putting patients at risk. The only people putting patients at risk are the ones trying to kill the Admiral. I'm trying to stop them. By turning the ICU into a battlefield, by involving federal agents and military personnel in what should be a medical facility? Caldwell's jaw tightened. I'm going to the hospital board. I'm going to demand answers. And if I don't get them, I'm going to the media. Elena's expression didn't change, but internally she calculated the threat level. Caldwell going public would create chaos, draw attention, and potentially interfere with the security protocols Hayes had put in place. It would also paint a target on the doctor's back for the same people who wanted Brennan dead. Dr. Caldwell, she said quietly, I understand your concerns, but going to the media right now would be a mistake. These people don't leave witnesses. Is that a threat? It's a fact. If you expose what's happening here, you become a liability to very dangerous individuals. They will find you. They will silence you. And no amount of publicity will protect you once they decide you're a problem. Caldwell paled slightly, but his resolve didn't waver. Then maybe it's worth the risk. Maybe someone needs to shine a light on whatever shadow war you people are fighting. Before Elena could respond, her comm device vibrated. She glanced at the message, 2 words that made her blood run cold. Incoming threat. Excuse me, doctor, we'll continue this conversation later. She turned and walked toward Brennan's room, her pace measured, her expression calm. But her mind was racing through scenarios, calculating response times, preparing for violence. The federal agent posted outside Brennan's door straightened when he saw her approach. Commander, we've got movement in the basement. Maintenance tunnel. Someone just cut through the seal. How many? Unknown. Heat signatures are unclear, possibly 2, possibly more. They're using some kind of thermal dampening. Elena's jaw tightened. Seal the ICU. No one in or out except medical staff already on the floor. Alert Hayes. And get ready. This is going to get loud. The agent spoke rapidly into his radio while Elena entered Brennan's room. The Admiral was awake, reading something on a tablet that had been cleared by naval intelligence. He looked up when she entered, immediately reading the tension in her posture. They're here, he said. Not a question. In the building. Coming up through the maintenance tunnel. We have maybe 5 minutes. Brennan set aside the tablet and tried to sit up. Pain flashed across his face, but he pushed through it. What's the play? You stay here. I handle it. The hell I do. This is my fight too. Your fight is staying alive long enough to testify. Let me do my job. Elena moved to the medical equipment, checking connections, verifying that everything was secure. If they had to move fast, she needed to know exactly what could be disconnected and what would kill him. Commander, Brennan started. That's not my title anymore. And right now I need you to trust me the same way you'd trust any operator you worked with. Can you do that? Brennan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Yeah, I can do that. Elena's comm device vibrated again. 3 hostiles confirmed. Armed. moving toward central elevator bank. "They're not coming through the tunnel," Elena said, half to herself. "That was a diversion. They're in the building already, using conventional access points." She moved to the door, cracking it open to observe the hallway. The ICU looked normal. Nurses at their stations, a doctor checking charts, visitors being turned away by security. But Elena could see the federal agents tensing, hands drifting toward concealed weapons, eyes scanning for threats. Then the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in immediately, bathing the hallway in harsh red emergency lighting. Somewhere down the corridor, a patient's monitor started alarming. A nurse called out, asking what was happening. Elena's hand went to the weapon Hayes had issued her, a compact Glock 19 hidden in a shoulder holster beneath her scrubs. She hadn't carried a gun in 4 years. The weight felt foreign and familiar at the same time. "Stay in the room," she told Brennan. "Lock the door after I leave. Don't open it for anyone except me or Agent Morrison." "Who's Agent Morrison?" "The federal agent outside your door. If anyone else tries to get in, assume they're hostile and act accordingly." Elena slipped into the hallway before Brennan could argue. The red emergency lighting created stark shadows, turning familiar corridors into a maze of blind spots and ambush points. She moved along the wall, weapon low and ready, every sense alert. Agent Morrison fell in beside her. "Central elevator is stuck between floors. They cut the power to trap it there while they make their approach through the stairwell." "How many agents do we have on this floor?" "6, including me. Another 4 in the building, but not in position." "So we're outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Perfect." Elena reached the nurse's station and dropped behind the counter, pulling Morrison down with her. "We need to funnel them, force them into a kill box where we have the advantage." The medication room. Single entrance, limited sight lines from the door, reinforced walls. "Good. Get 2 agents in there now. Tell them to take positions on either side of the door. Anyone who enters who isn't friendly gets put down." Morrison relayed the orders while Elena scanned the hallway. The other nurses had clustered together near the far end of the ward, confused and frightened. Dr. Caldwell was with them, trying to maintain order while looking like he wanted to demand answers. Then Elena saw them. 3 men emerged from the stairwell at the north end of the ICU. They wore hospital maintenance uniforms, but their movements were wrong, too precise, too tactical. Each carried what looked like a toolbox, but held it in a way that suggested something heavier and more dangerous than screwdrivers. "Contact," Elena whispered. "North stairwell. 3 hostiles." The men spread out immediately, creating overlapping fields of fire. They weren't trying to blend in anymore. Their mission was exposure, and they knew it. Speed was their ally now, not stealth. One of them raised his hand. A signal. The other 2 moved toward the nurse's station while he covered their approach. Elena made her decision in a fraction of a second. Waiting would give them time to position, to coordinate, to bring their superior numbers to bear. Action was the only advantage she had. She rose from behind the counter, weapon raised, and fired 3 rounds in rapid succession. The first hostile went down with bullets in his chest and shoulder. The second dove for cover, dropping his toolbox. It hit the floor and split open, revealing not tools, but weapons, submachine guns with suppressors and extra magazines. The ICU erupted into chaos. Nurses screamed and scattered. Patients who could move tried to get out of bed. Monitors alarmed as people pulled out lines in their panic. The second hostile came up firing, his suppressed weapon making sharp coughing sounds as bullets tore through the nurse's station. Elena rolled left, feeling rounds impact the wall where she'd been standing. Morrison returned fire, forcing the hostile back behind a medical cart. The third hostile was moving toward Brennan's room, his weapon up, his advance steady and professional. Elena couldn't let him reach that door. She broke from cover, sprinting across the hallway in a diagonal that would intercept the hostile's path. He saw her coming and adjusted his aim, but Elena was faster. She fired twice as she ran, both rounds hitting center mass. The hostile stumbled, but didn't go down. Body armor. He returned fire, forcing Elena to slide into a patient room. Rounds punched through the doorframe, showering her with splinters. She could hear the patient inside crying, trapped in their bed, unable to escape. "Stay down," Elena ordered, then popped out and fired again. This time she aimed high, headshots to bypass the armor. The hostile jerked backward, his weapon clattering to the floor. 2 down. 1 to go. but the third hostile had disappeared. Elena scanned the hallway, weapon tracking, searching for movement. Morrison was pinned behind the station, unable to advance. The other federal agents were engaged with additional hostiles who'd emerged from the south stairwell, the real assault team, using the first three as a distraction. Elena's tactical assessment shifted. This wasn't a hit team. This was a military operation. She keyed her comm. Hayes were under coordinated assault. At least 6 hostiles, possibly more. They have military-grade weapons and training. We need backup now. Backup is 4 minutes out. Hold position. 4 minutes might as well be 4 hours in a firefight. Elena moved toward Brennan's room, clearing corners, checking sight lines. The door was still closed, still locked from inside. Good. Then she heard the explosion. It came from the medication room. A sharp crack followed by the sound of the reinforced door being blown off its hinges. Smoke billowed into the hallway. The 2 agents Morrison had positioned inside stumbled out, coughing, disoriented. A figure emerged from the smoke. Tall, heavily built, wearing tactical gear that looked more military than medical. He carried a combat shotgun and moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. Elena recognized the stance, the equipment, the training. He was one of hers. Former special operations. Dishonorably discharged. Their eyes met across the smoke-filled hallway, and something like recognition passed between them. Fellow predators acknowledging each other before the hunt. Then he raised the shotgun. Elena dove back into the patient room as the first blast tore through the door frame. The patient screamed. Elena grabbed the bed and shoved it toward the door, creating a barrier. It wouldn't stop shotgun rounds, but it would slow them down. "Federal agent!" she shouted. "Drop the weapon and surrender!" The man's laugh was cold and familiar. "Commander Torres, they said you were dead." Elena's blood froze. He knew her real name. "Who sent you?" she called back. "Does it matter? You're not walking out of here. Neither is the Admiral. This ends tonight." He fired again, buckshot tearing through the bed. Elena returned fire through the gap, aiming low, trying for leg shots beneath his armor. One round connected, she saw him stumble, but he kept coming. Then Morrison appeared behind him, weapon raised. "Federal agent, drop it!" The hostile spun faster than Elena expected, his shotgun coming around in a tight arc. Morrison fired first, but the range was too close. The hostile's armor too good. The rounds hit, but didn't penetrate. The shotgun blast caught Morrison in the chest and threw him backward into the wall. Elena came out of the patient room firing. Her first 3 rounds hit the hostile's weapon, destroying the shotgun's receiver. He dropped it and reached for a sidearm, but Elena was already moving. She closed the distance before he could draw, driving her shoulder into his midsection and taking them both to the ground. They fought in silence. No shouted threats, no wasted words. Just brutal, efficient violence. The hostile tried to pin her arm. Elena broke his grip with a joint lock and drove her elbow into his throat. He gagged and rolled, trying to get space. Elena followed, staying on top of him, controlling his center of gravity. He managed to pull a knife from his boot. The blade came up fast, aimed at her neck. Elena caught his wrist, redirected the thrust, and slammed his arm against the floor. The knife skittered away. "Who sent you?" Elena demanded, her forearm across his throat. "Give me a name." The hostile smiled through bloody teeth. "You already know." He did something with his left hand, a quick movement Elena almost missed. She pulled back instinctively, releasing the pinhold. The hostile's hand went to his mouth. "No." Too late. He bit down on something and his body went rigid. Foam appeared at his lips. His eyes rolled back. Cyanide capsule. Elena checked for a pulse anyway, knowing she wouldn't find one. The hostile was dead within seconds, taking his information with him. She stood slowly, surveying the carnage. Morrison was down but breathing. The armor had saved him. The other hostiles were neutralized, either dead or in federal custody. The ICU looked like a war zone, with bullet holes in the walls, broken equipment everywhere, and terrified patients huddled in their rooms. But Brennan's door was still locked, still intact. Elena moved to it, knocked twice. "Admiral, it's Commander Torres. Open up." The lock clicked. The door opened. Brennan stood there with a scalpel in his hand, improvised weapon from the surgical tray by his bed. His face was pale, his breathing labored, but his eyes were alert. Is it over? He asked. Elena looked at the dead hostile, then back at Brennan. No, this was just the opening move. The backup Hayes had promised arrived 3 minutes later. Federal tactical teams that secured the floor, evacuated patients, and began processing the crime scene. Paramedics treated the wounded. Hospital administration arrived in force, led by a director who looked like she might have a stroke when she saw the damage. Elena gave her statement to Hayes in the hospital chapel, the only quiet space they could find. She recounted the attack step by step, leaving nothing out. When she got to the part about the hostile recognizing her, Hayes's expression darkened. He called you Commander Torres? Yes. That name is supposed to be buried, dead and forgotten. If word gets out that you're alive, then everyone who wanted me dead 4 years ago will come looking again. I know. Elena sat in one of the pews, suddenly exhausted. But keeping me secret isn't the priority right now. Protecting Brennan is. We can't protect him here. Not anymore. The hospital is compromised. Hayes pulled up something on his tablet. We're moving him to a military facility. Tonight. Doctors cleared it. He's stable enough if we use a medical transport with full life support. What about the people trying to kill him? We're assuming they'll try to hit the transport. So we're using 3 identical ambulances, different routes, fake manifests. Only you and I will know which one actually carries Brennan. Elena considered this. It's a sound plan, but it still leaves a vulnerability. Which is me. If they know I'm alive, they'll assume I'm protecting him. They'll watch for me. Use me to identify the real transport. Hayes nodded slowly. That's why you're not going with him. The words hit harder than Elena expected. What? You stay here, visible. Let them think you're still guarding an empty room. Be the decoy while we move the real asset. And if they figure out it's a diversion, then you handle it the way you've been handling everything else tonight, with extreme prejudice. Hayes met her eyes. I know you didn't ask for this, Commander. I know you walked away from this life. But right now you're the only person I trust to keep them focused on the wrong target while we secure the right one. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to say she'd done enough, given enough, bled enough for causes that had already cost her everything she'd valued. But Brennan's face flashed through her mind. The determination in his eyes when he talked about exposing the black sites, the absolute certainty that doing the right thing was worth any personal cost. She'd walked away from that certainty 4 years ago. Maybe it was time to walk back toward it. All right, she said. I'm your decoy, but I want full tactical control. I choose the ground, I set the terms, and when they come for me, I want the freedom to respond without worrying about legal oversight. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. You're asking for permission to kill anyone who threatens you. I'm asking for permission to survive. There's a difference. Not much of one. Maybe not. But it's the difference that matters. Hayes extended his hand. You have full tactical authority. Do whatever you need to do. They shook on it, and Elena felt the weight of that handshake settle into her bones like familiar armor she'd thought she'd never wear again. The transfer happened at midnight. 3 ambulances left Mercy General simultaneously, sirens blazing, taking different routes through Clearwater Bay. Elena watched them go from the ICU window, then returned to Brennan's empty room and made a show of checking equipment, reviewing charts, maintaining the fiction that he was still there. The federal agents played their parts perfectly, maintaining position around the room, checking IDs, turning away visitors. To any observer, it would look like nothing had changed. But Elena knew better. She knew they were watching, knew they were planning, knew they would come again. She settled into the chair beside the empty bed and waited. The attack came at 2:17 a.m., and it wasn't what she expected. No assault team, no hostiles with military weapons, just Dr. Caldwell, walking into the room with a syringe in his hand and murder in his eyes. Elena was on her feet instantly, weapon drawn. Don't move. Caldwell froze, the syringe halfway to the IV port. Chen, put it down, slowly. You don't understand. This isn't what it looks like. It looks like you're trying to inject something into a patient's IV line. That's exactly what the last person who tried this was doing. Elena's finger rested on the trigger. Put it down. Caldwell's hand trembled, but he didn't lower the syringe. They have my daughter. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. What? Elena's weapon didn't waver. Vice Admiral Keller's people. They took my daughter 3 hours ago, told me if I didn't kill Brennan tonight, they'd kill her. Tears streamed down Caldwell's face. She's 8 years old. She's at her mother's house for the week. They just took her. Elena's mind raced through the implications. Keller had anticipated the decoy, had planned for it, and instead of sending another assault team, he'd found leverage against someone already inside the hospital. Where's your daughter now? I don't know. They said they'd call with proof of life after I did this. Caldwell's voice broke. I'm a doctor. I took an oath, but she's my daughter. I understand, but killing Brennan won't save her. It'll just make you a murderer and give them one more body to cover up. Elena lowered her weapon slightly. There's another way. What way? They're watching. They'll know if I don't They're watching an empty room, Doctor. Admiral Brennan isn't here. He was transferred hours ago. Caldwell's eyes widened. Then this whole thing was a trap, and you just walked into it. Elena holstered her weapon and pulled out her comm device. Hayes, we have a situation. Dr. Caldwell's daughter has been taken. We need a recovery team mobilized immediately. Hayes' voice came through crisp and immediate. Acknowledged. Get me details. Elena turned back to Caldwell. Tell me everything. When they contacted you, how they contacted you, what they said. Every detail matters. Caldwell's story came out in fragments. A phone call on his personal cell. A man's voice he didn't recognize. Proof of life photos showing his daughter tied to a chair in a basement somewhere. Instructions to inject the contents of the syringe into Brennan's IV between 2 and 3 a.m., then call a specific number to confirm the job was done. What's in the syringe? Elena asked. Potassium chloride, massive dose. It would stop his heart within seconds, and in a patient with his injuries, it would look like cardiac arrest from complications. Give it to me. Caldwell handed over the syringe with shaking hands. Elena examined it, then carefully set it aside. You're going to call that number exactly as instructed. You're going to tell them the job is done, and then you're going to help us trace the call and find your daughter. They'll know I'm lying. They won't know anything except what you tell them. Admiral Brennan is in a secure location. As far as they're concerned, he just died in this hospital bed from complications. You play your part convincingly enough, and we buy time to locate your daughter. Hope flickered in Caldwell's eyes for the first time since he'd entered the room. You really think we can find her? I don't think. I know. Because people like Keller always make the same mistake. They assume they're smarter than everyone else. And that arrogance creates patterns we can exploit. Elena pulled up a chair. Now sit down and tell me everything again. This time, I'm looking for the details they didn't think mattered. Chitty. The call went out at 2:34 a.m. Caldwell delivered his lines with the flat effect of someone in shock, which was perfect because he was in shock. He told them the Admiral was dead, that he'd administered the injection as instructed, that he wanted his daughter back. The voice on the other end told him to wait for further instructions and hung up. Elena had federal tech teams tracing the call in real time, but she already knew what they'd find. Burner phone, probably ditched immediately after the call, location data scrubbed or spoofed. These people were professionals, but professionals following protocols left traces, and traces could be followed. Hayes arrived at the hospital 20 minutes later with a full tactical team. They commandeered a conference room and turned it into a command center, pulling up everything they had on Keller's known associates, financial records, property holdings. He's using a proxy, Hayes said, studying the data. Someone between him and the actual kidnappers. Someone expendable. Former military? Elena asked. Most likely. Someone from the black sites who owes him loyalty or fears his reach. Elena stared at the map of Clearwater Bay spread across the table. Caldwell said the photo showed a basement, concrete walls, exposed pipes, industrial lighting. That narrows the location. Not by much. Half the old buildings in the warehouse district have basements like that. Then we start there. Elena traced possible locations with her finger. Old textile factory here, Abandoned shipping facility here. Decommissioned power station here. Any of those still have active utility connections? One of the federal agents checked. Power station. Electricity was supposed to be cut off, but records show intermittent usage over the past 6 months. That's our target. Elena was already moving toward the door. Get me a tactical team and... Her comm device buzzed. Not a call, a message. From an unknown number. She opened it and felt her blood turn to ice. It was a photo. Caldwell's daughter, still tied to the chair. But now there was a man standing behind her, face obscured by shadows, but his posture and build unmistakably military. And in his hand, clearly visible, was Elena's old service photo. The one that was supposed to have been destroyed when Commander Elena Torres died 4 years ago. Below the image, a single line of text. We know who you are. Come alone, or the girl dies. Elena stared at the photo on her comm device, her thumb hovering over the screen as her mind calculated angles and probabilities. The man in the shadows knew exactly what he was doing, revealing just enough to confirm he had leverage while maintaining operational security. The concrete walls behind him could be anywhere. The exposed pipes offered no identifying marks. Even the lighting was generic industrial. But he'd made one mistake. In the reflection of a metal pipe behind the girl, barely visible, was the distorted image of a logo, faded paint on a wall. Elena zoomed in, enhancing the image until she could make out the partial letters. Whoa. OER AU. Power Authority. The decommissioned power station. Hayes appeared at her shoulder, reading the message. You're not seriously considering going in alone. I'm considering keeping an 8-year-old alive. Elena forwarded the image to the federal tech team. Get me everything on that power station. Blueprints, access points, sight lines. I need to know that building better than the people inside it. Commander, this is a trap. Of course it's a trap, but it's a trap they designed for someone they think is dead. Someone whose file says she operated alone, took unnecessary risks, prioritized the mission over her own survival. Elena met Hayes' eyes. They're expecting the old Elena Torres. They're going to get someone different. What's different? The old Elena Torres would have gone in alone like they demanded. This one is going to stack every advantage I can before I walk through that door. She turned to the tactical team assembled in the command center. I need 4 operators, special forces background, comfortable working in close quarters, no hesitation when it comes to lethal force. I need them positioned around the power station perimeter before I make entry. Hayes considered this. They said come alone. They said come alone or the girl dies. They didn't say anything about what happens after I arrive. Elena pulled up the power station blueprints on the main screen. I go in the front, visible and compliant. Your team secures the perimeter and waits for my signal. When I give it, they move fast and they move hard. What's the signal? Gunfire. One of the tactical operators, a compact woman with a Special Forces tab on her jacket, stepped forward. How do you want us positioned? Elena studied the blueprints with the kind of focus that came from years of mission planning. The building has 4 possible exits: main entrance on the south side, loading dock on the east, emergency exit on the west, and a ventilation access on the roof that's large enough for human egress. I want shooters covering the east and west exits with clear fields of fire. I want someone on the roof with a long rifle in case this goes sideways, and we need precision elimination. And I want 1 operator ready to breach the main entrance 30 seconds after I enter. The tactical operator nodded. ROE? Anyone pointing a weapon at the girl or at me is hostile. Everyone else is a judgment call. Elena checked her Glock, confirming the magazine was full and a round was chambered. I'll be wearing a wire. You'll hear everything I hear. If I say the word phantom, that means I've located the girl and need immediate extraction. If I say authority, that means I'm compromised and you need to breach regardless of risk to me. Hayes pulled her aside while the tactical team prepped their equipment. This is insane. You're walking into a building full of hostiles with nothing but a pistol and a prayer that they won't execute you on sight. They won't execute me on sight. They want information first. How I survived, who I've told, what I know about Keller's operation. That gives me a window. Elena's voice was calm, almost detached. And I'm not walking in with just a pistol. I'm walking in with the psychological advantage of being someone they thought was dead. People make mistakes when their assumptions get challenged. People also die when they underestimate their enemies. Then I'd better not underestimate them. Elena checked her watch. We have 20 minutes before they expect my response. That's enough time to get your team in position and brief Caldwell on what happens next. What does happen next? Best case scenario, we extract his daughter, neutralize the hostiles, and get actionable intelligence on Keller's network. Worst case, Elena paused. Worst case, you tell Caldwell I tried. She found the doctor in a private waiting room, staring at his phone like it might spontaneously produce answers. He looked up when she entered, hope and terror warring on his face. Did you find her? We have a location, the decommissioned power station on the east side of the warehouse district. Elena sat across from him. I'm going in to get her, but I need you to understand something. The people holding her are professionals. They won't hesitate to use her as leverage, and they won't hesitate to kill her if they think we're not cooperating. Caldwell's hands shook. What do you need me to do? Stay here. Stay visible. If anyone contacts you, you tell them exactly what I tell you to say. You're my anchor point. As long as you're acting normally, they think their plan is working. Elena leaned forward. Your daughter is alive right now because she has value. My job is to extract her before that value expires. Can you trust me to do that? You're asking me to trust a woman I don't even know. A woman who lied about her identity for 18 months. I'm asking you to trust someone who's done this before. Someone who's brought people home from worse situations than this. Elena's voice softened slightly. I know what it's like to lose people you care about, Dr. Caldwell. I know what it feels like to be helpless while others decide their fate. I won't let that happen to your daughter if I can prevent it. Caldwell studied her face, looking for deception or false promises. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he nodded slowly. Bring her back, please. I will. Elena left him there and rejoined the tactical team. They were loading into 2 unmarked vans, their movements efficient and practiced. Hayes handed her a tactical vest, lightweight armor that would stop most handgun rounds, but wouldn't be obvious under her jacket. Comms check, he said, fitting a nearly invisible earpiece into her ear. Elena spoke quietly. Check 1-2. Her voice echoed back through the command center speakers. The tactical team confirmed they could hear her clearly. Remember, Hayes said, you don't have to be a hero. If the situation deteriorates, use the extraction code and get out. Noted. Elena climbed into the passenger seat of the lead van. Let's move. The drive to the warehouse district took 12 minutes through empty pre-dawn streets. Clearwater Bay was still sleeping, unaware that somewhere in the industrial sprawl, a child's life hung in the balance. The van split up 4 blocks from the target, one team circling to cover the eastern approach, the other taking the western perimeter. Elena continued alone in a civilian vehicle Hayes had provided, a nondescript sedan that wouldn't trigger suspicion. She parked 2 blocks from the power station and walked the remaining distance, her hands visible, her pace deliberate and unthreatening. The building loomed against the dark sky like a concrete monument to industrial decay. Broken windows stared down like empty eye sockets. Graffiti decorated the lower walls. Chain-link fencing surrounded the property, but sections had been cut away by scavengers and urban explorers over the years. Elena approached the main entrance and stopped, waiting to be acknowledged. A voice called out from the darkness inside. Commander Torres, we were beginning to think you wouldn't show. I'm here. Where's the girl? Inside. Alive and unharmed, as promised. Come in slowly, hands where we can see them. Elena entered through the rusted metal door, her eyes adjusting to the dim interior lighting. The power station's main floor was a vast open space filled with decommissioned equipment. Massive turbines, control panels, catwalks overhead. Perfect for an ambush. Perfect for hiding. 3 men stepped out of the shadows, all armed with rifles, all moving with military precision. The one in the center was the man from the photo, tall, heavily built, with a face Elena recognized from her old life. Marcus Webb, former Delta Force, dishonorably discharged after an incident in Afghanistan that had been classified so heavily even Elena didn't know the details. She'd worked alongside him on 2 operations before the discharge. He'd been good then, efficient, ruthless, utterly professional. Now he was a mercenary working for someone willing to kidnap children. "Webb?" she said flatly. "I should have known." He smiled without warmth. "Commander? Or should I call you Nurse Chen? I have to admit the disguise was convincing. Took us 6 months to confirm you were actually alive. Where's the girl?" "Basement level, safe and sound." Webb gestured with his rifle. "But before we get to the exchange, I think we need to have a conversation about your resurrection. A lot of people are very interested in how you survived Yemen, how you disappeared, who helped you." "I survived by being better than the people trying to kill me. I disappeared by being careful, and I did it alone." Elena kept her voice level, emotionless. "Now show me the girl." Webb's smile widened. "You always were direct. I appreciated that about you. Made it easy to predict your moves." He nodded to one of his men who pulled out a radio. "Bring her up." The wait felt like hours compressed into seconds. Elena tracked every shadow, every sound, calculating firing solutions and escape routes. Her earpiece was silent, the tactical team maintaining radio discipline, waiting for her signal. Then she heard footsteps on metal stairs. A door opened at the far end of the space, and 2 more men emerged. Between them, stumbling and terrified, was a small girl with dark hair and tear-stained cheeks, Caldwell's daughter. "Emily," Elena said quietly, making her voice gentle despite the adrenaline screaming through her system. "My name is Sarah. I'm a friend of your dad's. I'm going to take you home." The girl's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded. Webb stepped closer, his rifle still trained on Elena. "The exchange is simple. You answer my questions, I let the girl go. You try anything stupid, my men kill you both. Understand?" "I understand you're making a mistake." "Really?" "Because from where I'm standing, I have all the advantages. I have the hostage, the superior numbers, the tactical position. You have nothing except whatever false confidence convinced you to walk in here. I have the truth about Keller's operation, about the black sites, about the missing operators and the falsified records." Elena watched Webb's expression shift slightly, a crack in his professional mask. "I know things that could end his career and put him in a military prison for the rest of his life. That's why you're here. That's why he sent you to clean up this mess." "Keller doesn't know I'm here." "Of course he does. You're his fixer, his expendable asset, the man he sends when he needs deniability and doesn't care about the body count." Elena took a calculated risk. "Tell me, Webb, what did he promise you? Money? Reinstatement? A clean record?" Webb's jaw tightened. "He promised me the truth about Afghanistan, about what really happened to my team." "And you believed him?" "I believe he has the files. I believe he has the power to clear my name. He has the power to bury you the same way he buried me, the same way he's trying to bury Brennan." Elena kept her voice calm, conversational. "You're not his ally, Webb. You're his loose end, and when this is over, when I'm dead and the girl's dead, and the evidence is secured, how long do you think it'll be before you have an accident, before you disappear into one of those black sites you've been protecting?" One of Webb's men shifted uncomfortably. The seed of doubt was planted. Webb's expression hardened. "Nice try. But I've survived too long by not trusting people who claim to have my best interests at heart." He raised his rifle slightly. "Last chance, Commander. Tell me who you've talked to, what you've told them, and where Brennan is right now. Do that, and the girl walks out of here." "Brennan is in federal protective custody at a location you'll never reach. I've told the FBI everything about Keller's operation, and the only person walking out of here with that girl is me." Webb's finger moved toward the trigger. "Wrong answer." "Phantom," Elena said clearly. The word triggered instant chaos. The tactical team breached the eastern entrance with a flashbang that turned the warehouse into a strobe of light and sound. Webb's men scattered, seeking cover, their training overriding their confusion. Webb himself dove behind a turbine housing, his rifle tracking toward Elena. But Elena was already moving. She drew her Glock and put 2 rounds into the nearest hostile before he could fully turn toward her. The man dropped. She pivoted and fired at the second man holding Emily, deliberately aiming high. A shoulder shot that spun him around and made him release his grip on the girl. "Emily, run!" Elena shouted. "East door, run now!" The girl ran, stumbling but fast, heading toward the breach point where a tactical operator was already moving to secure her. Webb fired at Elena, his round sparking off metal inches from her position. She returned fire, forcing him deeper into cover. The warehouse became a kill box. The tactical team moved with surgical precision, clearing sectors, eliminating threats. But Webb's men were professionals too. They'd set up overlapping fields of fire, created fallback positions, prepared for exactly this kind of assault. Elena counted muzzle flashes. 6 hostiles still active, plus Webb. The tactical team had 4 operators inside now, with the sniper providing overwatch from the roof. Roughly even odds, except the hostiles had the defensive advantage and knew the terrain. She moved through the chaos with muscle memory older than her nursing career, reading the battlefield like a language she'd never forgotten. Webb was trying to flank the tactical team, using the turbine housings as concealment. If he got to the catwalk overhead, he'd have the high ground and could rain fire down on everyone below. Elena cut him off, emerging from behind a control panel and firing 3 shots that forced him to abort his advance. He returned fire, cursing, recognizing her tactical awareness. "You haven't changed," he shouted over the gunfire. "Still fighting everyone else's battles. This isn't their battle. It's mine." Elena reloaded behind cover, her movements automatic. "You made it mine when you threatened that girl. She was just leverage. She was a child. There's a difference." Webb's response was drowned out by an explosion near the western entrance. One of his men had thrown a grenade at the advancing tactical team. The blast was deafening, the shockwave powerful enough to knock over loose equipment. Elena heard someone scream, heard Hayes shouting orders over the comm, heard the tactical situation deteriorating in real time. She made a decision. Instead of maintaining defensive position, she advanced, straight toward Webb's location, using the chaos as cover, moving faster than caution would recommend. She cleared 3 sectors in rapid succession, her Glock barking twice, 3 times, each shot finding its target. Webb saw her coming and tried to reposition, but Elena was already too close. She kicked his rifle aside as he tried to bring it to bear, stepped inside his guard, and drove the butt of her pistol into his temple. He staggered, blood streaming from the wound, but didn't go down. They fought hand to hand among the machinery, brutal and efficient. Webb was bigger, stronger, with a longer reach. But Elena was faster and had 4 years of controlled rage looking for an outlet. She ducked his haymaker and drove her fist into his solar plexus, folding him forward. Her knee came up, connecting with his face, breaking his nose with an audible crack. Webb went down hard. Elena kicked his rifle away and pressed her Glock to the back of his head. "Don't move." He laughed, blood bubbling from his broken nose. "You going to execute me, Commander? That's not very professional." "I'm not executing you, I'm arresting you." Elena pulled zip ties from her pocket, issued by Hayes, and secured Webb's wrists behind his back. "You're going to tell federal prosecutors everything you know about Keller. Every operation, every black site, every piece of illegal activity you witnessed or participated in. You're going to burn his entire network down. And if I refuse? Then you spend the rest of your life in a maximum security prison, wondering if each day will be the one where Keller decides you've become too much of a liability." Elena hauled him to his feet. "Or you cooperate, testify, and maybe, you get a reduced sentence and witness protection instead of a shallow grave." The gunfire around them was tapering off. The tactical team had neutralized the remaining hostiles. Hayes' voice came through Elena's earpiece, tight with controlled urgency. "Commander, we have the girl. She's safe. 2 of my operators are wounded but stable. What's your status?" Elena looked at Webb, then at the warehouse floor scattered with bodies and spent brass. "Primary target secured. Building clear. I'm coming out." She dragged Webb toward the eastern entrance where the tactical team had established a secure perimeter. Emily Caldwell sat wrapped in a shock blanket being checked by a paramedic. When she saw Elena, her face crumpled and she started crying, deep, gasping sobs of relief and trauma. Elena knelt beside her, keeping one hand on Webb's restraints. "You're okay now. You're safe. I'm going to take you back to your dad." I was so scared, Emily whispered. I know, but you were brave. You ran when I told you to run. That took courage. Elena smoothed the girl's hair back from her face. Your dad is going to be so proud of you. A tactical operator took custody of Webb, hauling him toward a waiting van. Hayes approached, surveying the damage with a mixture of relief and concern. We've got 3 hostiles dead, 4 in custody, including Webb. Your instinct about the power station was correct. We found evidence of extended occupation. Documents, equipment, communication logs. Webb was running a satellite operation for Keller. What kind of operation? Surveillance on federal facilities, personnel tracking, contingency plans for eliminating witnesses. Hayes pulled up something on a tablet. But we also found something else. Files that Webb downloaded from Keller's personal server. Classified materials documenting every black site operation for the past 8 years. Locations, personnel rosters, interrogation records, everything. Elena felt something shift in her chest. That's enough to prosecute. It's enough to dismantle his entire operation. Naval intelligence is already moving on the arrest warrant. Hayes looked at her with something like respect. You did it, Commander. You broke the case wide open. I didn't do it alone. Elena stood, helping Emily to her feet. Get this girl back to her father, and make sure Webb understands his cooperation is the only thing standing between him and a life sentence. Hayes nodded and began coordinating the extraction. Elena walked Emily to one of the vans, keeping her voice gentle and reassuring. The girl was still shaking, still processing the trauma, but she was alive. That was what mattered. As they drove back to Mercy General, Elena watched the sun rise over Clearwater Bay. Golden light painted the sky, turning the industrial landscape into something almost beautiful. She thought about Commander Elena Torres, the woman she'd been, the operator who'd believed in the mission above everything else. That woman had died in Yemen, killed by betrayal and disillusionment. But maybe she'd been reborn tonight, not as the same person, but as someone who could balance the skills of her past with the compassion she'd learned while hiding. The reunion between Caldwell and his daughter happened in the hospital chapel. Elena watched from the doorway as the doctor wrapped his arms around Emily and sobbed into her hair, his professional composure completely shattered by relief and love. Emily clung to him, crying, safe. Caldwell looked up and met Elena's eyes across the chapel. No words were necessary. He nodded once. Acknowledgement, gratitude, understanding. Elena nodded back and turned away, giving them privacy. Hayes was waiting in the hallway with new information. Keller's been taken into custody. Naval intelligence executed the warrant 30 minutes ago. He's being transported to a secure facility for interrogation. He'll lawyer up immediately, deny everything. Probably. But we have Webb's testimony, the documents from the power station, and Admiral Brennan's evidence. That's 3 independent sources, all pointing to the same conclusion. Hayes hesitated. There's something else. When they arrested Keller, he was in the process of destroying files. Physical documents he kept off the server network. My people recovered some of them before they were fully shredded. What kind of documents? Personnel files from Yemen, from the operation that supposedly killed you. Hayes' expression was grave. Commander, the ambush that took out your team, it wasn't enemy action. It was orchestrated by someone in your own command structure. Someone who wanted your team eliminated because you'd discovered evidence of the Black Site program. Elena's world tilted. 4 years of believing her team had died in combat, that she'd survived through luck and skill. 4 years of guilt for being the one who made it out. And now, who ordered it? Her voice was barely above a whisper. The signature on the operational order was Keller's, but the files suggest he was acting on behalf of someone higher up the chain, someone whose name is redacted in every document. Hayes met her eyes. This goes deeper than we thought. Keller wasn't running the black sites. He was middle management. Someone above him gave the orders. Then we need to find out who. We will. But right now, we need you to come in and give a full deposition. Everything you remember about Yemen, about your team, about what you discovered before the ambush. It's going to be difficult, dredging up those memories. I'll do it. Elena's voice was steady despite the turmoil inside her. Those people died because they trusted the system, because they believed following orders meant something. If there's a chance to get them justice, I'll relive every second of that day. Hayes nodded. The deposition is scheduled for 1400 hours at the federal building. I'll have a car pick you up. Elena returned to the ICU to collect her things from the locker room. The morning shift was arriving. Nurses chatting about their weekends, doctors reviewing patient charts. Normal hospital sounds, normal hospital life. Gloria Martinez saw her and did a double take. Chen, what are you doing here? I thought you were suspended. Administrative complications. They sorted themselves out. Elena pulled her bag from her locker. I'm taking a few days off, personal leave. After everything that happened last night, I'd say you've earned it. Gloria lowered her voice. Is it true what they're saying, that you stopped another attack on the Admiral? That you rescued Dr. Caldwell's daughter? I did my job. That's a hell of a job description. Gloria studied her with new awareness. You're not really a floor nurse, are you? Elena considered lying, maintaining the fiction for just a little longer. But Gloria had been kind when others had been cruel. She deserved something closer to truth. I used to be something else. Someone else. This... Elena gestured to the hospital around them. This was supposed to be my way out, my fresh start. But it didn't work. No, it didn't. Elena closed her locker. Turns out you can't run from who you are. Eventually that person catches up with you. So what happens now? Now I stop running. I face what I've been avoiding, and maybe I find a way to be both people at once. The one who can save lives, and the one who can end them when necessary. Elena shouldered her bag. Take care, Gloria. You're a good nurse and a better person than this place deserves. She left before Gloria could respond, walking through the hospital corridors one last time as Nurse Sarah Chen. Tomorrow she'd be Commander Elena Torres again, sitting in a federal deposition room, recounting the details of an ambush that had killed her team and destroyed her trust in the system she'd served. But tonight, she was simply someone who'd kept a promise, someone who'd brought a child home safely, someone who'd proven that the skills learned in darkness could be used to create light. The federal building's interview room was exactly as she remembered from years ago. Bland walls, uncomfortable chairs, a table bolted to the floor, and a recording device that captured every word. 2 Justice Department attorneys sat across from her, their expressions professionally neutral. Hayes stood against the wall, observing but not participating. Commander Torres, the senior attorney began, we appreciate your cooperation. Before we begin, I want to remind you that this deposition is being recorded and may be used in criminal proceedings against Vice Admiral Thomas Keller and others involved in the illegal black site operations. Do you understand? I understand. Then let's start with Yemen. Walk us through the mission that resulted in your team's deaths and your subsequent disappearance. Elena took a breath and began talking. She described the intelligence briefing, the insertion method, the target compound. She described finding evidence of torture in rooms that weren't supposed to exist. She described her team's growing unease as they realized the operation wasn't what they'd been told. And she described the moment when everything went wrong. We were extracting from the compound when the attack came, not from external hostiles, from our own support units. Drone strikes on our designated extraction point. Small arms fire from positions that should have been secured by friendly forces. Elena's voice remained steady, but her hands clenched beneath the table. My team leader recognized what was happening immediately. He ordered us to scatter, to get to secondary extraction points. But there were no secondary points. Every route had been compromised. How many survived the initial assault? 4 of us. Myself, Lieutenant Marcus Reeves, Staff Sergeant Jennifer Kowalski, and Corporal David Chen. Elena paused at that last name. David was the one who gave me the identity I used later. Before he died, he told me to take his sister's credentials, to disappear, to stay hidden until I could prove what happened. And did you? Prove what happened? I tried. For 6 months, I gathered evidence, tracked communications, built a case, but every time I got close to actionable intelligence, the trail went cold. Witnesses disappeared. Documents were destroyed. I realized that whoever ordered the hit had resources I couldn't match. Elena looked directly at the attorney. So I faked my death, took David's sister's identity, and became someone who couldn't threaten them anymore. Why come back now? Because Admiral Brennan had what I didn't: documented proof, official channels, and the rank to be taken seriously. Because keeping silent meant more people would die in those black sites. And because Elena stopped, choosing her words carefully. Because I was tired of being afraid. Tired of hiding. Tired of letting the people who killed my team get away with it. The deposition continued for 3 more hours. Elena answered every question with precise detail, her military training providing near photographic recall of dates, times, and operational specifics. When they finally released her, the sun was setting outside, painting the federal building's windows in shades of orange and red. Hayes walked her to the elevator. That was good testimony, strong. The prosecutors think they can use it to expand the investigation beyond Keller. To whoever ordered the Yemen hit. Exactly. Hayes hesitated. There's something else. Brennan wants to see you. He's stable enough for visitors now, and he specifically requested you. Elena felt a flicker of surprise. Why? He didn't say, but I think he wants to thank you personally. You saved his life twice, stopped an assassination team, and helped break the case wide open. That's worth a conversation. They drove to the military facility where Brennan had been transferred, a secure wing of a naval hospital with security that made Mercy General look like a public park. Elena submitted to 3 separate credential checks before being escorted to Brennan's room. The Admiral looked better than he had any right to. Still pale, still healing, but alert and focused. He smiled when Elena entered. Commander Torres? Or should I still call you Nurse Chen? Elena is fine. She pulled up a chair. How are you feeling? Like I got blown up and survived. Which, thanks to you, is accurate. Brennan gestured to the stack of files on his bedside table. I've been reading the reports, what you did at the power station, the tactical decisions you made. That was exceptional work. I had good support. You had good instincts. There's a difference. Brennan's expression grew serious. I also read your deposition transcript. What happened to your team in Yemen? I'm sorry. No one should have to go through that kind of betrayal. They died believing in the mission. That's something, at least. It's not enough, but it's something. Brennan shifted in his bed, wincing slightly. The reason I wanted to talk to you is because I have an offer. When I testify about the black sites, when this goes to trial, I want you there, not just as a witness, but as part of the prosecution team. You know these operations better than anyone. You've lived the consequences of their secrecy. Elena considered this. I'm not a lawyer. You're a survivor. You're living proof of what happens when the system fails. The jury needs to see that. They need to understand that these aren't abstract policy violations. They're life and death decisions that destroyed real people. Brennan met her eyes. Will you help me make sure Keller and everyone above him faces justice? Yes, I will. They talked for another hour, comparing notes, discussing strategy, building the framework of a case that would shake the military establishment to its foundations. When Elena finally left, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 4 years, purpose that wasn't shadowed by fear. She drove back to her apartment as night settled over Clearwater Bay. The building was quiet, her neighbors going about their evening routines, unaware that the mousy nurse from 4B had spent the day giving testimony that would trigger the largest military corruption investigation in decades. Elena unlocked her door and stepped inside. The man sitting in her living room smiled at her from behind a suppressed pistol. Hello, Commander. We need to talk about your testimony. Elena's hand moved toward her concealed weapon, but the man in her living room shook his head slowly, the suppressed pistol never wavering from center mass. Don't. I'm not here to kill you, Commander. If I were, you'd already be dead. He gestured to the chair across from him with his free hand. Sit. We have maybe 10 minutes before Hayes realizes his tracking protocol on you went dark, and I'd rather not waste them on unnecessary violence. Elena calculated angles and probabilities in the fraction of a second it took to cross the room. The man was professional, positioned with his back to the wall, clear sight lines to both the door and the window, weapon held with the casual competence of someone who'd fired thousands of rounds. His face was familiar in the way faces from classified briefings were familiar, seen but never met, studied but never engaged. She sat, keeping her hands visible on the armrests. You disabled my comm device. Signal jammer in my left pocket. Active radius of 20 feet. Very effective for private conversations. The man lowered his pistol slightly, but didn't holster it. My name is Colonel Richard Vance, Army Intelligence. And before you ask, yes, I'm on the list of people connected to the black site operations. Then why aren't you in custody with Keller? Because unlike Keller, I know when to cut my losses and cooperate with federal prosecutors. Vance's expression was unreadable. I'm here to offer you information in exchange for your testimony supporting my cooperation deal. Information about who really ordered the Yemen ambush. Information about the person sitting at the top of this entire network. Elena studied him, looking for deception. Why would I trust anything you say? Because I have nothing left to lose by telling the truth. Because the person who ordered your team killed is about to walk away clean unless someone can prove the chain of command. And because... Vance leaned forward slightly. I was in the operations center when the order came through. I heard the voice on the secure line. I know exactly who signed off on killing your people. The room seemed to contract around those words. Elena's pulse remained steady, her breathing controlled, but internally she felt the careful walls she'd built around that memory beginning to crack. Who? Rear Admiral Catherine Westwood, Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence. She ordered the Yemen strike, buried the evidence, and has been running the Black Site program as her personal intelligence operation for the past decade. Vance pulled a flash drive from his pocket and set it on the coffee table between them. This contains encrypted communications between Westwood and various site commanders, financial records showing money moving through shell corporations she controls, and operational orders bearing her digital signature. Everything you need to prove she's been orchestrating this entire operation while Keller took the fall as middle management. Elena stared at the flash drive like it was a live grenade. If you have this evidence, why not give it directly to the prosecutors? Because I need insurance. Westwood has connections that reach into the Justice Department, into naval intelligence, into places that could make my cooperation deal disappear overnight. But if you testify that you received this information independently, if you can corroborate what I'm telling prosecutors, then I become valuable instead of expendable. Vance's jaw tightened. I'm not proud of what I did. I followed orders that I knew were wrong because I told myself that's what soldiers do. But I'm done being someone else's weapon. I'm ready to face consequences for my actions. I just want to make sure I survive long enough to face them. Elena reached for the flash drive, then stopped. What's to prevent me from taking this and telling Hayes you broke into my apartment at gunpoint? Nothing. You could do that. Hayes would arrest me, charge me with intimidation and unlawful entry, and Westwood would have me killed in custody within 48 hours. Vance met her eyes. Or you could recognize that we both want the same thing, justice for the people who died because of this program. Your team in Yemen, the prisoners tortured in black sites, the operators who were silenced when they tried to speak up. We can get that justice together, or we can both lose it fighting each other. Elena took the flash drive and pocketed it. How do I know this data is legitimate? You don't. Not until you decrypt it and verify the contents against other evidence. But I'm betting you have access to people who can do that analysis. Vance stood slowly, his pistol disappearing into a shoulder holster. I'm also betting you're smart enough to recognize when someone's telling the truth because they have no better options. He moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. One more thing. Westwood knows you're alive now. She knows you testified today, and she's making arrangements to ensure you don't testify again. Watch your back, Commander. The people coming for you won't be mercenaries like Webb. They'll be true believers who think they're protecting national security. Then he was gone, disappearing into the hallway with the quiet efficiency of a ghost. Elena sat motionless for 30 seconds, processing the encounter, before pulling out her personal phone and calling Hayes. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight with concern. Commander, your tracker went offline. Are you secure? I'm secure, but we need to meet, now. I just received information that changes everything. Hayes arrived at her apartment 20 minutes later with 2 federal agents who swept the space for surveillance devices and threats. They found the signal jammer Vance had left behind, deactivated now, sitting on the kitchen counter like a calling card. Colonel Richard Vance, Hayes said when Elena described her visitor. He's on our watch list. Been trying to contact him for questioning, but he's been in the wind since Keller's arrest. He examined the flash drive with professional skepticism. And he just handed you encrypted evidence implicating Rear Admiral Westwood? That's convenient. Or desperate. He knows Westwood will eliminate him to protect herself. He's choosing prosecution over assassination. Elena pulled up Westwood's service record on Hayes's tablet. Look at her career trajectory. Every time there's a black site incident, she gets promoted. Every time an operator goes missing after raising concerns, she receives commendations for operational security. She's been hiding in plain sight because no one questions a flag officer with perfect performance reviews. Hayes scrolled through the record, his expression growing darker. If this is accurate, she's been running illegal operations for longer than Keller's even been in command. She's the architect, and everyone else is just construction crew. Can your people decrypt Vance's data? We can try, but if it's as heavily encrypted as I suspect, we're looking at hours or days, not minutes. Hayes pocketed the flash drive. In the meantime, you're not safe here. Vance was right about one thing. Westwood will move against you now that she knows you're a threat. Then let her come. I'm tired of running. Commander, I'm not running, Hayes. Not anymore. If Westwood wants to eliminate me, she'll have to do it publicly. She'll have to expose herself, and when she does, we'll be ready. Elena's voice was calm but absolutely certain. Put me somewhere visible. Make it known where I'll be testifying, when I'll be moving between locations. Force her hand. Hayes looked at her like she'd suggested walking into traffic. You want to use yourself as bait. I want to use myself as justice. There's a difference. The plan took shape over the next 6 hours. Elena would give a second deposition, this one scheduled publicly, announced to media outlets, with her identity as Commander Elena Torres revealed. The Justice Department would provide security, but not so much that Westwood couldn't theoretically attempt an interception. And federal surveillance teams would track every communication, every movement, everyone connected to Westwood's network. It's risky, one of the prosecutors warned during the strategy session at the federal building. We're betting that she'll react predictably. If she doesn't, if she just disappears or lawyers up, she won't, Elena interrupted. She spent a decade building this network, protecting her position, believing she's untouchable. People like that don't run when they're threatened. They strike back. The prosecutor looked unconvinced, but didn't argue further. The deposition was scheduled for noon the following day at the federal courthouse. Maximum visibility, maximum risk, maximum opportunity. Elena spent the night in a secure hotel room with 2 federal agents stationed outside her door. She didn't sleep. Instead, she reviewed everything she knew about Yemen, about her team, about the moment when trust had shattered and survival had become the only mission that mattered. Lieutenant Reeves had died trying to reach a radio, trying to call for help that would never come. Staff Sergeant Kowalski had provided covering fire while the rest of them ran, taking 3 rounds to the chest before she went down. Corporal Chen had survived longest, long enough to tell Elena to take his sister's identity, to disappear, to stay alive until she could make this right. I'm making it right, David, she whispered to the empty room. I'm making it right. Morning arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. Elena dressed in business attire. The first time in 4 years she'd worn anything other than scrubs or casual clothes. The federal agents escorted her to an armored vehicle, and they drove through Clearwater Bay's morning traffic toward the courthouse. The media was already gathering when they arrived. News vans, reporters with cameras, protesters holding signs about military accountability. The Justice Department had leaked her story. Navy nurse reveals secret identity as presumed dead Special Operations Commander. Prepares to testify about illegal black site program. It was sensational enough to dominate the news cycle and guaranteed maximum attention. Elena walked up the courthouse steps surrounded by federal agents, her expression calm, her movements measured. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. She ignored them all, focused on the building ahead. Inside, the deposition room was identical to the previous one. Same bland walls, same uncomfortable chairs, same recording equipment. But this time, there were observers, Justice Department officials, naval intelligence representatives, and attorneys from 3 different agencies, all watching to ensure the testimony was properly documented. The lead prosecutor was a sharp-eyed woman named Melissa Grant, who'd built her career on military corruption cases. She began with softball questions, establishing Elena's identity and background for the record. Then she moved into deeper territory. Commander Torres, in your previous deposition, you stated that your team was killed by what you believe to be friendly fire. Do you still maintain that assessment? I do. And do you have information about who ordered that strike? Elena glanced at Hayes, who stood against the wall. He gave a subtle nod. The flash drive data had been decrypted overnight, and analysts had verified it against other evidence. Everything Vance had provided was legitimate. Yes, Elena said clearly. Rear Admiral Catherine Westwood, Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence. She ordered the drone strike on our extraction point and coordinated with ground units to ensure no survivors. The room erupted. Naval Intelligence representatives objected, demanding proof. Grant produced the decrypted communications from Vance's flash drive, displaying them on screens around the room. Email chains between Westwood and site commanders. Financial records showing payments to contractors who'd participated in the Yemen operation. Voice recordings that had been digitally authenticated. One of the Naval Intelligence attorneys stood, his face red. This is hearsay and inadmissible, and Admiral Westwood is a decorated officer with 30 years of exemplary service. Admiral Westwood is a war criminal who's been operating illegal detention facilities and ordering the execution of American service members, Grant shot back. And Commander Torres isn't the only witness. We have testimony from Colonel Richard Vance, documentary evidence from multiple sources, and financial records that trace directly to accounts under Westwood's control. Where is Vance now? Why isn't he in custody? He is in custody. Federal protective custody, offering his full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Grant turned back to Elena. Commander, did Admiral Westwood ever have direct contact with you or your team before the Yemen operation? No, we received orders through normal channels. We had no indication that the mission was compromised until the attack began. And after you escaped Yemen, did you attempt to report what happened? I tried, for 6 months. For every time I got close to someone who could help, they either disappeared or told me to stop asking questions. I realized the cover-up went too high for me to fight alone. So I disappeared instead. Grant walked Elena through the rest of her testimony, the years in hiding, the decision to become Sarah Chen, the encounter with Admiral Brennan that had pulled her back into the open. Every answer was documented, recorded, entered into official record. When the deposition finally concluded 3 hours later, Grant approached Elena privately. That was excellent testimony. Combined with Vance's cooperation and the documentary evidence, we have enough to arrest Westwood and charge her with conspiracy, murder, and violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. When? Tonight. We're coordinating with Naval Intelligence to execute the warrant at her residence. We want you there as part of the arrest team, not as an operator, but as a witness. She needs to see that the person she tried to kill is the one bringing her down. Elena agreed without hesitation. The arrest operation was scheduled for 8 p.m. Elena rode with Hayes and a federal tactical team to Westwood's residence, an upscale townhouse in a quiet neighborhood far removed from the military bases she commanded. The street was cordoned off, neighbors evacuated under the pretense of a gas leak investigation. Elena stood beside Hayes as the tactical team approached the front door. They knocked, announced themselves, waited the required time. When no response came, they breached. The townhouse was empty. Not abandoned, empty in the way places are when someone leaves in a hurry. Closets stood open with hangers scattered on the floor. Drawers had been pulled out and dumped. The safe in the study was open and cleaned out. She ran, Hayes said, his voice tight with frustration. Someone tipped her off. Elena moved through the rooms, reading the space the way she'd been trained to read tactical environments. Westwood hadn't run panicked, she'd run prepared. This was an evacuation, not an escape. She'd had time to gather essentials, destroy evidence, activate contingency plans. In the study, Elena found a laptop sitting on the desk, deliberately left behind, its screen dark. She touched the trackpad and it illuminated, showing a single document open on the screen. A message addressed to her. Commander Torres, congratulations on your resurrection. I underestimated you, which is a mistake I rarely make. Your testimony will cause me significant inconvenience, but it won't destroy me. I have resources you can't imagine, connections you'll never trace, and safe harbors in countries that don't extradite to the United States. But before I disappear, I wanted you to understand something. Your team in Yemen didn't die because they discovered the black sites. They died because Lieutenant Reeves was compromised by foreign intelligence. He was selling operational details to the highest bidder, and his handler demanded access to the black site network. I ordered the strike to prevent that breach. Your team's deaths were regrettable but necessary. You've been mourning heroes, Commander. You should have been condemning traitors. CW. Elena read the message twice, her expression unchanging. Then she called Hayes over and showed him the screen. Is she telling the truth? Hayes asked quietly. I don't know, and it doesn't matter. Elena's voice was steady. Even if Reeves was compromised, executing an entire team without trial is still murder. Even if she was protecting the black sites, running illegal detention facilities is still a war crime. She's trying to justify the unjustifiable. Hayes nodded and called in forensic teams to process the laptop, but Elena knew they wouldn't find anything useful. Westwood was too careful, too experienced, too connected to leave real evidence behind. The media storm that followed was immediate and overwhelming. News outlets ran stories about the fugitive admiral, the special operations commander returned from the dead, the military conspiracy that reached the highest levels of naval intelligence. Elena's face appeared on every major network, her testimony quoted in newspapers across the country. The Justice Department offered her protective custody, a new identity, relocation to anywhere she wanted. She declined. Instead, she returned to Mercy General Hospital. Gloria Martinez nearly dropped her coffee when Elena walked through the emergency department doors wearing scrubs and her old ID badge. Chen, what are you doing here? Working, if you'll have me back. Elena approached the nurse's station. I know my situation is complicated now, but I'm still a licensed nurse and this hospital still needs staff. You're also a federal witness in the biggest military scandal in decades. That comes with security concerns, media attention. I know, but I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. Elena met Gloria's eyes. I'm Elena Torres, former Special Operations Commander, current registered nurse. Both of those things are true. Both of those things are who I am. Gloria studied her for a long moment, then smiled slowly. Well, Elena Torres, we happen to have an opening in the ICU. The last nurse we had there kept getting involved in gunfights and federal investigations. Think you can do better? I'll try. The return to normal hospital work was surreal. Patients who'd been treated by Sarah Chen now learned they'd been cared for by someone with classified military training. Doctors who'd dismissed her as incompetent now approached with cautious respect. Dr. Caldwell sought her out personally to apologize for his previous treatment. I was wrong about you, he said simply. You weren't a bad nurse. You were someone hiding extraordinary skills behind ordinary performance. I should have seen that. You saw what I wanted you to see. That was the point. Elena finished updating a patient chart. How's Emily? Recovering. Therapy's helping. She asks about you sometimes. Wants to know if the nice lady who saved her is okay. Tell her I'm okay. Tell her I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Admiral Brennan was transferred back to Mercy General for continued recovery 2 weeks later. Elena was assigned to his care, and they fell into an easy routine of medical checkups and strategic discussions about the ongoing prosecution. Westwood's still in the wind, Brennan reported during one session. Interpol has her flagged, but she's got resources. Could be years before they find her. Or she could surface when she thinks it's safe. People like her don't stay hidden forever. They need to win. Elena checked his surgical incisions, noting the healing progress. The important thing is that her network is collapsing. Keller's cooperating. Vance is testifying. Every black site commander we've identified is either in custody or being investigated. Even if she escapes justice, her operation is destroyed. That's not enough. No, but it's something. Elena finished her assessment. You're healing well, Admiral. Another month and you'll be cleared for light duty. What about you? When will you be cleared for whatever comes next? Elena considered the question. I'm already doing what comes next. She gestured to the hospital around them. This is what I chose. Saving lives instead of ending them. Helping instead of fighting. You can do both. You proved that. Maybe. But I'd rather be known for the lives I saved than the battles I won. The preliminary hearing for Keller's court-martial was held 6 weeks after his arrest. Elena attended as a witness, sitting in the gallery as prosecutors laid out the evidence against him. The black site operations, the illegal detentions, the falsified reports, and finally, his role in the attempt to assassinate Admiral Brennan. Keller sat at the defense table looking diminished, his uniform stripped of rank insignia, his face gray with the knowledge of what was coming. When the prosecution called Elena to testify, his eyes followed her to the witness stand with something that might have been recognition or regret. "Commander Torres," the prosecutor began, "do you recognize the defendant?" "Yes, Vice Admiral Thomas Keller." "Did you ever work under his command?" "No, but I worked parallel to operations he oversaw. I knew his reputation." "And what was that reputation?" "Efficient, ruthless when necessary, loyal to the people above him in the chain of command." Elena looked directly at Keller. "I respected him once. I thought he represented the best of what military service could be." "I was wrong." Keller's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The testimony continued for 2 hours, Elena recounting her knowledge of the Black Site program and her team's deaths in Yemen. When she finished, the prosecutor thanked her and she stepped down. As she walked past the defense table, Keller spoke quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. "She'll get away with it, you know. Westwood, she always does." Elena stopped. "Maybe. But you won't. And that's a start." The court-martial proceeded over the following weeks, with witness after witness testifying to Keller's involvement in illegal activities. Colonel Vance provided devastating testimony about direct orders from Keller to eliminate witnesses. Admiral Brennan described the assassination attempt in clinical detail. Former Black Site guards testified about interrogation methods that violated every convention on human rights. The verdict came down on a Tuesday afternoon. Guilty on all counts. Keller was sentenced to life in a military prison, no possibility of parole. As military police led him from the courtroom, he looked back once at Elena, his expression unreadable. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no closure, just the quiet certainty that one part of this was finished. But Westwood remained free. Her face appeared on wanted posters in federal buildings, her name on Interpol's most wanted list. Tips came in regularly, sightings in South America, in Eastern Europe, in Southeast Asia. None of them led anywhere concrete. Elena returned to her routines at Mercy General, treating patients, saving lives, building something that felt like normalcy. But she kept her tactical skills sharp, spent time at the range, maintained the physical conditioning that had kept her alive in darker places, because she knew Westwood would return eventually. People like that always did. They couldn't resist the urge to reclaim what they'd lost, to prove they were smarter than the people hunting them. The call came 4 months after Keller's conviction. Hayes contacted Elena at the hospital, his voice tight with controlled urgency. "We have a situation. Westwood made contact with the Justice Department. She wants to negotiate a surrender." "That doesn't make sense. She has no reason to surrender." "She claims she has information about foreign intelligence operations that compromise national security, information she'll trade for immunity and witness protection." Elena's instinct screamed warning. "It's a trap." "Probably. But the information she's offering is significant enough that we have to take the meeting." She specified the terms: neutral location, minimal security, and she wants you there. "Why me?" "She didn't say, but the Justice Department thinks it might be because you're the only person she respects enough to negotiate with, the one who beat her despite being presumed dead, or because she plans to kill me and tie up her last loose end. That's why we'll have tactical teams covering every angle. But ultimately, the decision is yours, Commander. You don't have to do this." Elena thought about her team lying dead in Yemen, about the prisoners tortured in black sites, about Emily Caldwell tied to a chair, terrified, about every person who'd suffered because Westwood had believed herself above accountability. "Set up the meeting. I'll be there." The negotiation was scheduled for a private airfield outside Clearwater Bay, neutral ground with clear sightlines and limited access points. Elena arrived with Hayes and a full federal tactical team, but Westwood had specified minimal visible security. They positioned snipers on nearby buildings and kept the response units out of immediate view. A private jet landed exactly on time. The stairs deployed, and Rear Admiral Catherine Westwood descended like someone arriving for a routine business meeting, perfectly composed, expensively dressed, showing no sign of being a fugitive who'd spent months in hiding. She walked across the tarmac alone, stopping 20 feet from where Elena stood. "Commander Torres, you look well for someone who's supposed to be dead." "I could say the same about you, Admiral. Most war criminals don't age so gracefully in hiding." Westwood smiled coldly. War criminal. Such an ugly term for necessary work. She glanced at the federal agents surrounding them. "I assume we can speak freely?" "Say whatever you came to say." "I came to offer you the truth. The real reason your team died. The actual scope of the operation you stumbled into." Westwood pulled a tablet from her jacket pocket and held it up. "Everything is on here. Communications with foreign assets, bank records showing money from hostile governments, operational plans for attacks on American soil that were prevented because of intelligence gathered at the black sites. Your Lieutenant Reeves wasn't just selling information, he was actively coordinating with enemy operatives to compromise multiple operations." Elena kept her expression neutral. "You're saying you saved American lives by executing my team." "I'm saying that war is complicated, Commander. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who betray us. Sometimes the right choice looks like murder. Sometimes justice and necessity aren't the same thing." Westwood's voice carried conviction born from years of believing her own lies. "I'm prepared to turn over this evidence in exchange for immunity. The Justice Department gets everything they need to understand why the Black Site program was necessary. I get to retire quietly without a trial. And you think I'll support this deal? I think you're smart enough to recognize that prosecuting me accomplishes nothing except wasting taxpayer money on a lengthy trial. I think you understand that the information I'm offering is worth more than revenge." Westwood stepped closer. "I'm giving you a chance to let this end peacefully, Commander. You can walk away knowing that your team's death served a purpose, that their sacrifice protected American lives. Isn't that better than the alternative?" Elena stared at the woman who'd ordered her team killed, who'd operated torture facilities, who'd spent years evading accountability. She thought about David Chen telling her to survive, to make this right. She thought about the promise she'd made to herself in that empty apartment 4 years ago, that she would build something better than revenge. "No," she said quietly, "it's not better, and I'm not letting you walk away." Westwood's expression hardened. "Then you're choosing the hard way." She dropped the tablet and her hand moved toward her jacket pocket. Fast, practiced, lethal. Elena was faster. She closed the distance before Westwood could draw her weapon, trapped the Admiral's arm against her body, and drove her to the ground with a textbook takedown. Federal agents swarmed, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Westwood struggled for 3 seconds before going still, her face pressed against the tarmac, her carefully maintained composure finally shattered. Elena knelt on her back and pulled the weapon from Westwood's pocket, a compact pistol with a suppressor already attached, a weapon meant for close-range execution. "You never intended to negotiate," Elena said. "You came here to kill me and escape in the confusion." Westwood laughed bitterly. "Of course I did. Did you really think I'd let you testify against me, that I'd spend my life in prison because you got lucky in Yemen?" She turned her head enough to meet Elena's eyes. "You should have stayed dead, Commander. You'd have been safer." "Maybe, but I wouldn't have been free." Federal agents hauled Westwood to her feet, restraining her wrists with zip ties. Hayes collected the pistol and the dropped tablet, his expression a mixture of relief and anger. "That was reckless, Commander. She could have shot you before you reached her." "She could have, but she didn't." Elena stood, brushing dirt from her clothes. "Because people like her always hesitate at the last second. They always believe they're too smart to fail, too important to die. That hesitation is what gets them caught." Westwood was led toward a waiting federal vehicle, her perfect composure finally cracked, her voice rising in protests about rights and violations and conspiracies. No one listened. The evidence on her tablet would be analyzed, verified, used to complete the case against her and everyone else involved in the Black Site program. But the thing Elena knew, the thing Westwood would never understand, was that the tablet's contents didn't matter. Whether Reeves had been compromised or not, whether the black sites had prevented attacks or not, the fundamental crime remained the same. Westwood had chosen to operate outside the law, to become judge and executioner, to believe that her vision of justice superseded everyone else's rights, and now she would finally face the consequences of that choice. The trial date was set for 6 months later. In the meantime, Elena returned to Mercy General and continued the work she'd chosen, treating patients, saving lives, building something that felt like redemption. She was checking vitals on a post-surgical patient when her comm device buzzed with a message from Hayes. Westwood just made a deal, full cooperation in exchange for life instead of execution. She's giving up everyone, foreign contacts, domestic collaborators, every operation she oversaw. The whole network is coming down. Elena read the message twice, then pocketed the device and returned to her patient care. Justice was happening. The system was working. The people who'd operated in darkness were being dragged into light. It wasn't perfect. Westwood would spend her life in prison instead of facing execution. Some conspirators would escape through legal technicalities or diplomatic immunity. The full truth might never be publicly known. But it was enough. That evening, as her shift ended, Elena found Dr. Caldwell waiting at the nurse's station. He looked uncomfortable, clutching a file folder with white-knuckled hands. "Commander, Elena, I need to tell you something I should have mentioned before." He opened the folder, revealing documents marked with security classifications. When federal investigators interviewed me after Emily's rescue, they asked about my military service. Standard background check. But they found something in my records that I'd forgotten about, or maybe repressed. Elena took the folder and scanned the contents. Medical records from 20 years earlier, psychological evaluations, deployment records to locations that matched black site operations. "You were there," she said quietly. "You worked at one of Westwood's facilities." For 6 months early in my career, I was told it was a standard deployment treating combat injuries, but the patients, Caldwell's voice broke. They weren't wounded soldiers. They were prisoners. And the injuries I was treating weren't from combat. They were from interrogation. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Westwood's cooperating, because she's giving up names, and mine will be on that list." Caldwell met her eyes. "I should have reported what I saw. I should have refused the orders. But I was young and scared, and I believed that following orders meant something. By the time I understood what was really happening, I'd been complicit for months. So I requested a transfer, came home, and tried to forget." Elena closed the folder and handed it back. "What do you want from me?" I need to know if you think I should turn myself in, if I should confess before they find me in Westwood's records. If there's any chance at redemption for someone who stood by while others suffered." Elena thought about the years she'd spent hiding from her own past, about the comfort she'd found in being someone smaller and quieter and less complicit, about the moment when she'd finally stopped running and started fighting back. "Yes," she said, "you should turn yourself in. You should tell the truth about what you saw and what you did. It won't erase what happened. It won't absolve you of responsibility. But it might help prevent the same thing from happening to someone else." Caldwell nodded slowly, accepting the judgment. If they prosecute me, will you testify about what I did, about how I helped save Emily when I could have just followed Westwood's orders?" "I'll testify to exactly what happened. Nothing more, nothing less. What the jury does with that information is their decision, not mine." He thanked her and left, his shoulders bent under the weight of consequences finally arriving. Elena stood at the nurse's station, watching the emergency department continue its endless cycle of crisis and treatment, and realized that this endless process of people facing their choices and living with the results was what justice actually looked like. Not dramatic trials or cinematic confrontations, but the slow, grinding work of holding everyone accountable, including yourself. Her comm device buzzed again. Another message from Hayes. "Westwood wants to talk to you. Private conversation, recorded for evidence. Says she has something you need to hear. Your call." Elena deleted the message without responding. Whatever Westwood wanted to say, whatever final revelation or justification she'd concocted, it didn't matter anymore. The woman's power was gone. Her network was collapsing. Her legacy would be measured in prison sentences and ruined careers. That was enough. Elena finished her shift, changed into civilian clothes, and walked out of Mercy General into a cool evening that promised rain. She'd received messages from 3 different news networks requesting interviews, 2 book publishers interested in her story, and 1 film producer who wanted to option the rights to her life. She'd declined them all. Her story wasn't entertainment. It was survival, justice, and the long road back from darkness. Some things didn't need to be shared with the world. Her phone rang as she reached her car. Unknown number. She answered anyway. "Commander Torres, this is Captain Raymond Hayes. I apologize for the late call, but I wanted to inform you personally. Catherine Westwood attempted suicide in federal custody 40 minutes ago. Medical teams intervened. She's alive but sedated. The Justice Department is relocating her to a psychiatric facility for evaluation before trial." Elena felt no satisfaction, no relief, just tired acceptance of one more complication in a case that would probably drag on for years. "Thank you for letting me know, Captain. There's more. Before the attempt, she gave her attorneys a message to deliver to you if anything happened to her. I have it here. Would you like me to read it?" "No, whatever she wanted to say, I don't need to hear it." "Understood. For what it's worth, Commander, you did good work here. You brought down a network that had been operating for over a decade. You saved lives and exposed crimes that would have continued indefinitely. That matters." "I know, but it doesn't bring my team back. It doesn't undo the torture or the deaths or the years of running. It just means that maybe the next person won't have to go through what I did." She ended the call and sat in her car, watching rain begin to fall on Clearwater Bay. Somewhere in a federal facility, Westwood was being monitored and evaluated and prepared for trial. Somewhere in a military prison, Keller was serving his life sentence. Somewhere in witness protection, Vance was building a new identity and trying to outrun his own guilt. And here, in a hospital parking lot, Elena Torres was exactly where she'd chosen to be, neither hiding nor fighting, but simply living as the person she'd spent 4 years learning to become. Her phone lit up with one final message, this time from Admiral Brennan. "Heard about Westwood. You okay?" Elena typed back, "I'm okay. Getting coffee. Want me to bring you one on my rounds tomorrow?" "That'd be good." "Thanks, Commander. Just Elena, I'm off duty." She started her car and drove home through the rain, past the federal building where prosecutors were building cases, past the hospital where patients were fighting for their lives, past the quiet neighborhoods where people slept unaware of the battles fought in their names. Tomorrow she would return to work. She would check vitals and administer medications and comfort frightened patients. She would be the nurse everyone now knew was also a soldier, the woman who'd survived death and chosen to spend her second life saving others. But tonight, she was simply someone who'd made it through another day. Someone who'd faced her past and refused to let it define her future. Someone who'd learned that strength wasn't about how hard you could fight, but about knowing when fighting was necessary and when healing was the braver choice. The rain continued to fall as Elena Torres drove through Clearwater Bay, free at last from the shadows that had hunted her, ready at last to build something that looked like home. The rain continued to fall as Elena Torres drove through Clearwater Bay, but by the time she reached her apartment, the storm had gentled into a steady drizzle that made the streetlights shimmer like scattered diamonds. She parked and sat for a moment, hands still on the wheel, letting the quiet settle into her bones. Her phone buzzed. A text from Gloria. "News just broke about Westwood's arrest. Everyone's talking about it. You hanging in there?" Elena typed back, "I'm fine. See you tomorrow." But she wasn't fine. Not yet. Fine would come later, after the trials and the testimony and the endless procedural machinery of justice ground through its paces. Right now, she was simply existing in the space between what had been and what would come next. She climbed the stairs to her apartment and found Jake Morrison, the security guard from Mercy General, sitting on the landing outside her door. He stood when he saw her, his expression uncertain. "Morrison, what are you doing here?" "Heard about the arrest. Figured you might want someone watching your back tonight, in case Westwood had other assets we don't know about." He gestured to the coffee cup beside where he'd been sitting. "Been here about an hour. Your neighbors think I'm weird." Elena almost smiled. "You are weird, but thank you. You want me to stay? I can crash on your couch, keep an eye on things." She considered it, then shook her head. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to be alone tonight. Process everything." Morrison nodded, understanding. You ever want to talk about the Marine Corps stuff, the transition back to civilian life, the weight of what you carry? I'm around. 8 years in Fallujah taught me a few things about living with memories you can't shake. I'll remember that. He left, and Elena entered her apartment, locking the door behind her with the automatic precision of someone who'd spent years checking perimeters. The space felt different now, not safer exactly, but more honest. She wasn't hiding here anymore. She was simply living. She made tea and sat by the window, watching rain streak the glass while her mind processed the past months. From the moment Marcus Brennan had crashed into Mercy General's trauma bay to Westwood's attempted suicide in federal custody, the trajectory had been relentless. But now, finally, there was space to breathe. Her laptop sat on the coffee table, and almost without thinking, Elena opened it and navigated to a folder she hadn't accessed in 4 years. Photos of her team in Yemen. Lieutenant Reeves grinning beside a transport vehicle. Staff Sergeant Kowalski demonstrating a new tactical technique. Corporal David Chen making faces at the camera during a brief moment of downtime. The people Hayes and Westwood wanted her to believe were traitors. Elena studied Reeves's face, looking for signs of deception or divided loyalty. She found only the expression of a dedicated officer who'd believed in the mission. If he'd been compromised, if he'd been selling information, she would carry that knowledge without knowing if it was truth or justification manufactured by people trying to excuse murder. But it didn't change the fundamental equation. Even if Reeves had been guilty, executing an entire team without trial was still wrong. Even if the black sites had prevented attacks, operating torture facilities was still criminal. Westwood had chosen to become something monstrous while claiming noble intentions, and that choice defined her more than any intelligence she might have gathered. Elena closed the laptop and finished her tea, then went to bed and slept dreamlessly for the first time in months. Morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through clearing clouds. Elena dressed for work, pinning her ID badge, the one that now read her real name, to her scrubs. The woman in the mirror looked back with steady eyes, no longer trembling, no longer hiding behind carefully constructed incompetence. Mercy General felt different when she arrived. News of Westwood's arrest had broken overnight, and hospital staff who'd worked alongside Sarah Chen now understood exactly who they'd been dismissing for 18 months. Some avoided eye contact, embarrassed by their previous treatment. Others approached with apologies or questions or simple acknowledgement. Elena handled each interaction with the same calm professionalism she'd maintained throughout her time there. She didn't need their apologies. She'd chosen to be underestimated, and they'd simply given her what she wanted. Dr. Caldwell intercepted her before she could reach the ICU. He looked like he hadn't slept, dark circles under his eyes. His usual crisp appearance rumpled. "I did it," he said without preamble. "Called the federal hotline this morning. Told them about my time at the black site. They're sending investigators to interview me this afternoon. That took courage. It took desperation. I couldn't keep carrying that weight." Caldwell's voice dropped. "My daughter asked me last night why the bad people took her. I couldn't tell her the truth, that it was because of choices I made 20 years ago. But I can make sure she grows up knowing I tried to make it right. That's all any of us can do." He nodded and walked away, his shoulders a little straighter despite the consequences waiting for him. Elena continued to the ICU and found Admiral Brennan awake and alert, reading something on a tablet. He looked up when she entered, his expression brightening. "Commander, I heard about Westwood. Hell of a way to end things." "It's not ended yet. She's still alive, still facing trial." Elena checked his vitals, noting the continued improvement. "But it's closer to finished than it was." "Closer counts." Brennan set aside the tablet. "I got word this morning from the Joint Chiefs. They're initiating a full review of the Black Site program. Every facility, every operation, every person involved. It's going to take years to untangle, but they're committed to transparency and accountability. Because they have no choice. The evidence is public now. Partially, but also because people like you and me refuse to let them bury it." Brennan studied her face. "I'm being restored to active duty next month. Full medical clearance, return to command, and I've been asked to oversee the review process, make sure it's thorough and honest." "That's good. You're the right person for it. I want you on the team, not as a nurse, as a consultant, Someone who understands how these operations work from the inside, who can identify the patterns and protocols they'll try to hide. Brennan leaned forward. You'd have full security clearance, access to all classified materials, and the authority to pursue any lead you think is relevant. It's a chance to make sure what happened to your team never happens to anyone else. Elena was quiet for a long moment, processing the offer. Part of her wanted to accept immediately, to dive back into that world and burn out every remaining shadow. But another part remembered the years of hiding, the cost of living with violence, the relief she'd felt when nursing had given her a different way to matter. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. The offer stands indefinitely. She finished her assessment and moved on to other patients, the familiar rhythm of hospital work grounding her. But Brennan's offer echoed through her thoughts all morning, pulling at old instincts and newer commitments. At lunch, she found Gloria in the cafeteria. The charge nurse had saved her a seat, and Elena joined her with a tray of food she'd barely registered selecting. "You look troubled," Gloria observed. "Westwood news getting to you?" "Not Westwood. Decision-making." Elena pushed food around her plate. "I've been offered a position with the military review team. Consulting work, investigating the Black Site program. It's important work. Meaningful. But I chose nursing for a reason. I chose healing over fighting, and I'm worried that going back, even as a consultant, means losing what I've built here." Gloria considered this. "Can I tell you something? When you first started here, I thought you were the worst nurse I'd ever supervised. Shaky hands, missed sticks, constant mistakes. But you never gave up. You kept showing up, kept trying, kept taking the criticism without complaint. That kind of persistence, that's healing work too. That's choosing to grow instead of quit. I was faking the incompetence. I know that now, but the persistence was real. The choice to be here day after day, even when people treated you poorly, that was real." Gloria met her eyes. "So the question isn't whether you can do the consulting work. Obviously you can. The question is which version of yourself you want to be. The one who investigates darkness or the one who creates light?" Elena thought about that through the rest of her shift. She thought about it while treating a construction worker with a broken arm, while comforting a child scared of getting stitches, while helping an elderly woman understand her medication regimen. Each small interaction was a choice to help rather than harm, to build rather than destroy. By the time her shift ended, she'd made her decision. She found Admiral Brennan before leaving and delivered her answer. "I appreciate the offer, sir, but I'm declining. She gestured to the hospital around them. "This is where I'm needed, where I choose to be." Brennan looked disappointed, but not surprised. "I understand. The offer remains open if you change your mind." "I won't, but I'll help however I can from here. If you need consulting on specific questions, expert testimony, anything that doesn't require me to leave nursing, I'm available." "That's fair, and probably healthier than diving back into the darkness full time." Brennan extended his hand. "Thank you, Commander, for everything." "Just Elena. I'm not a commander anymore. You'll always be a commander to the people whose lives you saved." She shook his hand and left, feeling lighter than she had in days. The weeks that followed settled into new patterns. Westwood remained in psychiatric evaluation while prosecutors built their case. Keller continued serving his sentence, and his cooperation led to additional arrests throughout the military command structure. Colonel Vance testified before congressional committees, and his revelations triggered reforms and oversight protocols. Dr. Caldwell was charged with complicity in black site operations but received a reduced sentence in exchange for his testimony and cooperation. He served 9 months in a minimum security facility, lost his medical license temporarily, but eventually returned to Mercy General in a teaching capacity, training new doctors while forbidden from practicing. The first time Elena saw him after his release, he approached her with genuine humility. "I wanted to thank you for telling me to turn myself in. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but Emily can grow up knowing I tried to make things right." "How is she?" "Stronger every day. Therapy's helping. She talks about you sometimes, calls you the brave lady." Elena smiled slightly. "Tell her bravery is just fear that keeps moving forward." The media attention gradually faded. Elena gave one interview to a military journal, carefully controlled, focused on the importance of accountability rather than personal drama. She declined every other request, letting her testimony speak for itself. 6 months after Westwood's arrest, the trial finally began. Elena testified on the third day, spending 8 hours on the witness stand recounting her team's deaths, her years in hiding, and the evidence she'd gathered. Westwood sat at the defense table looking diminished, her expensive lawyers arguing procedural points while avoiding the substance of the charges. The verdict came after 2 weeks of deliberation, guilty on all counts. Conspiracy, murder, operating illegal detention facilities, obstruction of justice, and 17 other charges. Westwood was sentenced to life without parole in a federal supermax facility. As guards led her from the courtroom, Westwood looked directly at Elena. No words were spoken, but the message was clear. You won, I lost, and we both know which one of us deserves it. Elena felt no triumph, just quiet satisfaction that justice, however imperfect, had arrived. The sentencing hearing included victim impact statements, families of prisoners who'd died in black sites, operators who'd been threatened into silence, and Elena, speaking for her team. Lieutenant Marcus Reeves, Staff Sergeant Jennifer Kowalski, and Corporal David Chen died believing they were serving their country. They died trusting that following orders meant something. Admiral Westwood took that trust and weaponized it. She turned their dedication into a trap and their service into a death sentence. No verdict can bring them back. No sentence can undo what was done. But this trial establishes that no one, regardless of rank or position, is above accountability. That matters. That's what they died believing in, and that's what we owe them. The courtroom was silent when she finished. Even Westwood's lawyers looked uncomfortable. Afterward, Hayes found Elena in the hallway. That was powerful testimony. The jury was moved. I wasn't trying to move them. I was trying to tell the truth. Sometimes that's the same thing. Hayes hesitated. There's something else. We recovered files from Westwood's personal computer, encrypted data she'd hidden even from her lawyers. Analysis shows Lieutenant Reeves wasn't compromised. The intelligence she claimed he was selling to foreign handlers, it was fabricated. She invented the treason narrative to justify the Yemen strike. Elena absorbed this information without visible reaction. So she murdered my team to cover up the black site program, then invented a story to make herself look like the hero who stopped a security breach. Yes, I'm sorry. Don't be. I knew she was lying. I just couldn't prove it until now. Elena looked toward the courtroom where Westwood's fate had been sealed. At least my team can rest knowing their names are cleared. That night, Elena visited the military cemetery where her team had been buried under false circumstances 4 years earlier. Their graves were marked with simple headstones that listed them as killed in action, details classified. She'd never visited before. It had been too dangerous while hiding, too painful when she'd finally surfaced. But now, with Westwood convicted and the truth established, she could finally say goodbye properly. She knelt at each grave in turn, speaking quietly. Marcus, you were right to trust the mission, wrong to trust the people running it. But you died a hero, not a traitor. The record's been corrected. Jennifer, you held the line when everyone else was running, gave us the seconds we needed to survive. I'm sorry I couldn't save you the way you saved me. David, I used your sister's name to stay alive, became a nurse like she was, tried to honor her memory and yours by choosing healing. I hope that was enough. She sat between the graves as evening settled over the cemetery, feeling the weight of 4 years lift gradually from her shoulders. The guilt remained. Survivors always carried that. But it was balanced now by justice, by truth, by the knowledge that she'd done everything possible to make their deaths mean something. Her phone rang. Gloria's name on the screen. Hey, you okay? Elena looked at the graves, then at the sky turning purple and gold with sunset. Yeah, I'm okay. Good, because I need you to come in early tomorrow. We're doing orientation for new nurses, and the director wants you to speak to them. Share your experience. Talk about what it means to really care for patients. I'm not sure I'm the right person. You're exactly the right person. You chose this work when you could have chosen anything else. That means something. Gloria's voice softened. Besides, half these new nurses are terrified. They need to see someone who's been through hell and still shows up every day choosing to help people. Elena agreed and ended the call, then stood and placed a hand on each headstone in turn. I've got to go. Work in the morning, but I'll come back, I promise. The next morning, she stood before a group of 20 new nurses in Mercy General's conference room. They looked young and nervous and hopeful, exactly the way she'd looked when she'd first entered medicine, before special operations, before Yemen, before everything that had shaped her into who she was now. My name is Elena Torres, she began. Some of you might recognize me from news coverage of the Westwood trial. Others might know me as the nurse who worked here for 18 months under a different name. What matters is this. I chose nursing because I believe healing is stronger than harm. I believe showing up every day to help people is more important than any other work I could do. And I believe that every patient who walks through those doors deserves our complete attention and care, regardless of who they are or where they come from. She talked for 20 minutes about the realities of hospital work, about the exhaustion and the heartbreak and the moments of pure joy when someone survived against impossible odds. She talked about treating people with dignity, about advocating for those who couldn't advocate for themselves, about finding strength and compassion rather than control. When she finished, a young woman in the front row raised her hand. How do you balance it? The violence you experienced in your previous career and the healing work you do now, don't they contradict each other? Elena considered the question carefully. They used to contradict. When I first became a nurse, I thought I had to choose between being a soldier and being a healer. But I've learned they're different tools for the same purpose, protecting people who can't protect themselves. Sometimes that requires force. Sometimes it requires gentleness. The key is knowing which tool the situation needs and having the wisdom to choose correctly. The orientation continued for another hour, and Elena fielded questions about everything from her tactical training to her favorite patient interaction. When it ended, several new nurses approached to thank her personally, and she saw in their eyes the same determination she'd carried through her own worst moments. This, she realized, was her new mission. Not investigating corruption or hunting war criminals, but training the next generation to choose healing even when violence seemed easier. Teaching them to be strong enough to be gentle, confident enough to be humble, skilled enough to know their limitations. Over the following months, Elena settled fully into her role at Mercy General. She took on additional teaching responsibilities, mentoring new nurses and developing training protocols for trauma response. She worked with Gloria to improve the ICU's procedures, drawing on her tactical experience to create more efficient emergency response systems. And she continued treating patients with the same meticulous care she'd given when pretending to be Sarah Chen, except now her hands didn't shake, her confidence wasn't hidden, and people understood that her capabilities ran deeper than they'd imagined. Admiral Brennan completed his recovery and returned to active duty, overseeing the military review that would reshape special operations oversight for the next decade. He visited Mercy General occasionally, always making time to check in with Elena and share progress reports. We've identified 47 black site facilities, he told her during one visit. Shut down 32 so far. The rest are in process. Every prisoner's case is being reviewed for potential rights violations. That's good work. It's necessary work. And it wouldn't have happened without you. Brennan's expression grew serious. I'm recommending you for the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, for actions beyond the call of duty and exposing the Black Site program and saving my life. The ceremony's in 3 months if you'll accept it. Elena thought about medals and recognition, about standing on a stage while generals pinned commendations to her uniform. She'd received awards before, Bronze Stars, Purple Hearts, classified commendations for operations that would never be publicly acknowledged. They sat in a box in her closet, gathering dust. I'll accept on one condition. The ceremony happens here at Mercy General, where I actually want to be recognized. And the medal goes in the hospital's lobby with a plaque explaining that real service is about showing up every day to help people, not just moments of dramatic heroism. Brennan smiled. I'll make it happen. The ceremony took place on a bright autumn morning in Mercy General's main lobby. Military brass attended alongside hospital staff, patients, and community members who'd followed Elena's story. Gloria stood beside her as Admiral Brennan read the citation, and Elena accepted the medal with quiet grace. But the moment that mattered came afterward, when Emily Caldwell approached shyly with her father. The girl was taller now, her eyes clearer, the trauma of her kidnapping fading into something manageable. "My dad said you got a medal for being brave," Emily said. Elena knelt to her level. "I got a medal for doing my job. The real brave person was you, for running when I told you to run, for trusting me when you were scared. Will you keep working here at the hospital?" "Yes, this is where I belong." Emily hugged her impulsively, and Elena returned the embrace, feeling something shift in her chest. This child, alive and healing because Elena had chosen to fight when fighting mattered, that was worth more than any medal, any recognition, any accolade. That evening, Elena returned to her apartment and found a package waiting at her door. No return address, just her name in precise handwriting. She opened it carefully, half expecting some final message from Westwood, or another ghost from her past. Inside was a photograph. Her team in Yemen, all 4 of them together, taken the day before the ambush. Someone had recovered it from classified files and sent it to her anonymously, a reminder of who they'd been before everything went wrong. On the back, a note in unfamiliar handwriting. They were heroes. So are you. A friend, Elena placed the photograph on her bookshelf, beside her nursing degree and the few personal items she'd accumulated since becoming herself again. Then she made dinner, reviewed case notes for tomorrow's patients, and went to bed early because her shift started at 6 a.m. Life continued in its steady rhythm. Seasons changed, patients arrived and departed, new nurses joined the staff while experienced ones moved on to other opportunities. Elena remained constant, the nurse who'd once been a commander, the woman who'd survived death and chosen life, the healer who understood violence but preferred compassion. 3 years after Westwood's conviction, Gloria announced her retirement. The hospital threw a party, and during her farewell speech, she looked directly at Elena. "When I first supervised Sarah Chen, I thought she was the worst nurse I'd ever seen. Then I learned she was Elena Torres, and I realized she was the best nurse I'd ever worked with, not because of her tactical skills or her dramatic story, but because she chose this work when she could have chosen anything. That choice, that commitment, is what nursing needs more of." Elena took over as charge nurse after Gloria left, bringing the same quiet competence to management that she'd brought to patient care. She implemented new protocols, mentored struggling staff, and created an environment where people felt valued rather than dismissed. And slowly, Mercy General transformed. The culture shifted from one of hierarchy and dismissiveness to one of mutual respect and collective excellence. Other hospitals noticed and began recruiting Elena for leadership positions, offering larger salaries and prestigious titles. She declined them all. Mercy General was where she'd rebuilt herself. It was where she'd learned that strength came in many forms, that healing was harder than harming, and that showing up every day to care for strangers was the most meaningful work she'd ever done. On the 5th anniversary of Admiral Brennan's arrival in the trauma bay, Elena stood in that same space during a quiet moment between emergencies. The room had been repaired and repainted, the bullet holes patched over, the blood scrubbed away. No physical evidence remained of the violence that had erupted here. But the memory persisted. Brennan thrashing on the gurney, doctors backing away in fear, Elena stepping forward with 4 words that had changed everything. She'd been invisible then, dismissed, underestimated. Now she was recognized, respected, valued for exactly who she was, someone who'd walked through darkness and chosen to create light, someone who'd survived the worst and dedicated herself to preventing others from experiencing it. Her comm device buzzed. Emergency incoming, multi-vehicle accident on the highway, multiple critical patients expected. Elena called for the trauma team to assemble, checked equipment, prepared the bay for incoming casualties. This was her battlefield now. Not gunfire and explosions, but sirens and surgical precision. Not taking lives, but saving them. Not operating in shadows, but working in bright hospital lights where every action was visible and every outcome mattered. The ambulance arrived. Paramedics rushed through the doors with patients on gurneys. Elena moved forward to meet them, her voice calm and commanding. "Talk to me. What do we have?" And as the familiar chaos of emergency medicine surrounded her, the shouted vitals, the scrambling staff, the desperate fight to save lives, Elena Torres felt something she'd spent years searching for: purpose. Not the kind given by orders or rank or classified missions, but the kind chosen freely every single day. The kind that came from showing up, from caring, from refusing to let another person die if she had any power to prevent it. She'd been a soldier who learned to be a nurse. Now she was a nurse who'd once been a soldier. And the difference mattered more than anyone could understand without living both lives. The trauma bay filled with urgent activity. Elena coordinated responses, directed treatments, and made split-second decisions that would determine whether these patients survived or succumbed. And through it all, her hands remained steady, her mind clear, her purpose absolute. She'd been called many things: commander, warrior, survivor, hero. But the title that mattered most was the one she'd chosen for herself: nurse, healer. Someone who showed up every day to fight for life instead of death, to create instead of destroy, to prove that the strongest people weren't the ones who could harm most effectively, but the ones who could help most consistently. Hours later, when the emergency had passed and the patients were stable, Elena stepped outside for air. Dawn was breaking over Clearwater Bay, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. The city was waking up, people heading to work, children going to school, ordinary life continuing its endless cycle. She thought about Lieutenant Reeves and Staff Sergeant Kowalski and Corporal David Chen buried in a military cemetery under cleared names. She thought about the prisoners tortured in black sites who'd finally received justice. She thought about Emily Caldwell, growing up safe and loved. She thought about every patient she'd treated, every life she'd saved, every moment she'd chosen healing over harm. And she thought about the woman she'd been 5 years ago, hiding, fearful, convinced that invisibility was the only safety available to someone like her. That woman was gone, transformed not through dramatic revelation or sudden change, but through the daily choice to be better, to care more, to show up even when showing up was terrifying. Elena Torres walked back into Mercy General as the morning shift began, ready for another day of ordinary miracles and quiet heroism. Ready to prove again that the most powerful thing a person could do was choose compassion in a world that often demanded cruelty. She'd been underestimated, dismissed, overlooked. She'd fought back, survived, and won. But more importantly, she'd learned that true strength wasn't about dominance or violence or proving herself to people who'd never valued her anyway. True strength was about knowing your worth without needing others to validate it. About choosing your own path instead of following the one others expected. About building something meaningful from the wreckage of what was lost. Elena had done all that, and more. And now, finally, she was free. Not because her enemies were defeated or her past was resolved, but because she'd decided that her future mattered more than either. The woman everyone had laughed at had saved lives, exposed corruption, and transformed a hospital's entire culture. The nurse they'd dismissed had brought down a military conspiracy that reached the highest levels of command. The person they'd underestimated had proven that quiet persistence was stronger than loud dominance, that healing required more courage than harming, and that showing up every day to help others was the most radical act of all. Elena Torres was exactly who she'd always been: a survivor, a fighter, a healer. But now everyone else knew it too, and that made all the difference.